Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
What's up, everybody? Pleasant good evening to you, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to the Do Dissidents podcast. My name's Keaton Weiss, here, a literal Cretan for the evening, live from Crete. Russell Dobular.
Opa!
Opa,
Yes.
opa. So
As
I always
John
call you
McCain
guys
said,
dissidents.
we're all Cretans now.
Yes, we're all Cretans now, indeed. Which we're used to being called that anyway, so it's not too big an adjustment for us, obviously. But whether you call yourselves a Cretan or a dissident, tonight, as I tweeted out earlier, we are the cool kids. We are the cool kids tonight because we are skipping the Republican primary debate. That's right. The Republican primary debate is starting in 50 minutes, 50 at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we are skipping it. Why would we watch seven losers jockey for a distant second place? What is there to debate, really? I mean, who gives a shit about the debate? You all know. Listen, we all know. If you don't vote for Donald Trump, you're going to go to hell. So what's there to argue about, right? I mean, what debate is there? What? Who gives a shit? What? That's important? We're supposed to act like, oh wow, let's see if Vivek goes easy on DeSantis tonight. Who fucking cares? Who fucking cares? The Lord God, Donald Trump, is who you're either with or against. We all know that, and we all know where our loyalties lie. And so why the hell would we spend 2 hours sitting here like schmucks commenting on a Republican debate? What, they got Don Burgum, whatever the fuck that guy's name is, Tim Scott. Who cares? Boring.
In the end, it was Donald Trump who achieved our decades-long dream of overturning Roe v. Wade. So the least that we can do is give him our votes and our loyalty. I think he's earned that at this point. And I'm sure this is true of you too, I've spent many an afternoon hanging around the entrance of an abortion clinic screaming, shame, shame, shame. Yeah. And, now I get to take the kids to the movies on a Sunday.
Exactly.
I don't have to sign up for my shift at the abortion clinic shaming women,
No, these other guys, they're all talk. They're all talk, no action.
We have Donald Trump to thank for that. So, yeah. Welcome to the Do Dissidents Family Prayer Hour.
Yeah. As you can see, we've begun pandering heavily to the Rumble audience. Now that Rumble is emerging as a serious competitor to YouTube, we are chasing those right-wing views. So that's what we'll be doing, which is why we're not covering the Republican primary debate, because we know there's only one true thing, and that is Donald Trump. And so why would anybody watch that?
We're riding those Rumble balls.
Exactly.
We are bouncing on those like a Pilates class, baby.
Indeed.
We are riding hard. Seriously? Yeah, like the debates only become relevant if Donald Trump really stumbles. So exactly. Right. How many of these are you going to watch? Like the first one was kind of interesting just to see who the contestants are.
Exactly.
But
It's the
you
first
really
one. It's
need
the
to
kickoff
watch.
to the season. It's the first thing. We'll see what the dynamics are. See if they make really a difference. When they didn't make much of a difference, now, if Donald Trump were just sentenced to 10 years in prison yesterday, this debate would be worth covering. But as it stands now, why? Who the hell cares?
Which, he was just a judge just found that they, defrauded on in valuing their assets. And a lot of other things like that could drop and it can have an impact. But as of now, yeah, you're going to. DeSantis last time, it seemed like he was just trying not to lose, like just to stay above the fray and stay in the fight and not fuck up, which I thought he succeeded at. Vake, he's the most talented politician up there as a politician, but he just doesn't have any background or base.
Yeah, he has no
Like
cachet.
he has no cachet. And with Haley, it may be true, as polling showed, that she would actually perform best because of how well she would do with all of these reluctant Biden voting suburban libs.
Right.
But she'll never get through a Republican primary in a million years.
Right. And the other thing you have to remember, the fact that the polls didn't move much after that debate is sort of after that first debate is sort of doubly significant, since you have to figure those who are watching the debate without Trump there are those who are most open to voting against Trump, right? Just logic would have it, right? If you're watching 7 people who aren't Trump compete, that must mean you're at least open to the idea of voting for someone else. And yeah, the fact that Haley gained a little bit made sense, since, she does appeal to that kind of swath of voters that Russell had just mentioned. But a second time, we're going to watch that again for 2 hours? Why? Makes no sense.
Her cat was named Vagina.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to sit there and be like, Tim Scott, what was that about? That was so
wow.
boring.
Mike Pence really owned Chris Christie on that one. Yeah.
Krispy Kreme, as we now call it.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to get that.
Boring. Well, I'm here at 8:15 on the East Coast of the mainland United States. Russell is up in the middle of the night once again, because he is in the later stages. He got one more week out there in the Mediterranean, but here he is today exploring the sites. You want to give a little diary entry while the crowd files in? 320 in the YouTube chat. Got a nice crowd filing in on Rumble as well, 59 strong as of a few minutes back. Please hit that like button wherever you are. Please hit that subscribe and or follow button wherever you are. So go ahead, Russell.
Okay, so I did a lot of research to figure out where to go on this trip. And this was a really good call. So this is on the southern coast of Crete. There's a little village, Matala. So you have these incredible caves here that were carved out in Neolithic times and inhabited. Then it became a Phoenician port. Then it was a Roman port. And then in the 60s, the hippies discovered it, and they were living in there. This became this hippie encampment. Joni Mitchell actually lived in these caves in the 60s. So this is why you see all of this kind of very hippie kind of stuff, peace is the way. They very famously have a sign saying you're alive today, tomorrow never comes. And you have all these street artists doing that kind of chalk art. Yeah, you have that on all the roads. So that sign is one of the things the town is famous for. The scenic beauty is insane. So this is, I climbed up into one of those caves. There's another assumed risk thing. Okay, in America, there's no fucking way they would not have put out concrete paths with regular steps. Basically, when you get to the entrance to this, you have to pay €4 and it says, enter caves at your own risk. And yeah, you got to do some rock climbing and shit to get up there.
Yeah, there it is from the outside.
Yeah, but incredible experience to go up there. And the scenic beauty of Crete, just pictures can't capture it. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's really just stunning scenery out here. But this is nice because it's not as well known. Like you go to Venice, I mean, literally the tourists outnumber the residents. You come someplace like this, it's not as on the radar of tourists.
Right.
I mean, there are tourists, but even insofar as there are tourists, they're mostly Greek, so it's not overrun by foreigners. You know, so it's you know, and it's tiny. Like it's literally like you could walk this whole town in 10 minutes. Like there's a couple of streets and that's it. That's the whole place. So yeah, it's really nice. Really nice there.
Excellent. And then you're going to what? You're going to Athens after this and then coming back, right?
That is it. This is the only part of this trip that, aside from the caves, is not, you know, museums and ruins. This is the only almost vacation part of this, where it's not intensively programmed with study and research.
Right.
But then when I go to Athens, obviously that we kind of go back. That's gonna be like Rome, you know, doing the Acropolis, the museums, the Oracle at Delphi. Maybe I might do a side trip to Sparta, just so I can go on the mountain and scream Sparta into on video.
Exactly.
Spartans!
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go to Thermopylae.
All righty, cool. Well, folks, like I said, as you're filing in here, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and let's start the insanity. Our evening of non-debate coverage begins. So this was a story that 60 Minutes put out, and it made the rounds on Twitter quite a bit. Here we have it. In Ukraine, U.S. tax dollars are funding more than just military aid. CBS writes, this is in conjunction with the 60 Minutes video segment. Earlier in September, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made his fourth trip to Ukraine since Russia invaded. He stood next to Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba at a press conference and stressed that the U.S. would continue to aid Ukraine. The United States is committed to empowering Ukraine to write its own future, Blinken said at a press conference while in Ukraine. In the crucible of President Putin's brutal and ongoing war, the United States and Ukraine have forged a partnership that is stronger than ever and growing every day. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who served as the commander of the U.S. Army in Europe until 2017, said the assistance has been crucial to Ukraine's survival. Without that sort of aid, I think Ukraine would have probably been overrun, defeated, certainly would have lost a lot more, Hodges said. Now, here's where it gets a little bit unique from a coverage standpoint. The war has also impacted Ukraine's financial standing, with the country's economy contracting by an estimated 31% last year, according to the United States Agency for International Development, more commonly referred to as USAID. The U.S. government is subsidizing small businesses in Ukraine, including Tatiana Abramova's knitwear company, to keep them afloat. There's Tatiana's knitwear company right there. American officials from USAID helped Abramova find new customers overseas. Oh, that's nice. In the midst of war, her company is supporting over 70 families. Especially in the condition of war, we have to work, she said. We have to pay taxes. We have to pay wage, salary to our employees. We have to work. Don't stop. The U.S. government has also bought seeds and fertilizer for Ukrainian farmers. America is covering the salaries of Ukraine's first responders, all 57,000 of them. The U.S. funds divers who clear unexploded ammunition from the country's rivers to make them safe again for swimming and fishing. All right, well, that part is only fair, I would say. Americans, however, here at home, this is later in the article, face their own financial challenges, and many question if the country should be sending so much money overseas. Senator Lindsey Graham feels it's some of the best money the U.S. has ever spent. Here's what we've gotten for our investment. We haven't lost one soldier. We reduced the combat power of the Russian army by 50%, and not one of us has died in that endeavor, Graham said. This is a great deal for America. The outcome of the war may be decided by America's willingness to keep paying. Lieutenant Alexander Shurishin.
You really needed to work more Blanche Dubois in there if you're going to do Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, I probably should have. They just would have slowed it down a little bit, I was trying to keep it more up-tempo. But note taken. A father of two who enlisted on the day Russia invaded Ukraine pointed to the cost for Ukrainians. Ukrainians pay with their lives, he said, and I believe and I hope that their lives cost much more than money, much more than taxpayers' money. All right, now look, I won't make the disingenuous argument that some people make when they say that, hey, money spent in Ukraine could be money spent here, because it's not. Because as we know, our government wouldn't spend any money on us here. It would go to some other bullshit boondoggle, right? So I'm not going to go as far as to say, hey, we could have health care if we just stopped funding Ukraine. No, because, we would never receive this kind of investment here no matter what. But it is a little extra insulting, and I feel like now the Republicans are starting to make some hay out of this, at least the Freedom Caucus people. Matt Gaetz just said he's putting an amendment in whatever spending bill is finally approved on to avert a government shutdown. At this point, they're not going to avert a government shutdown. It'll be whatever bill gets us out of the government shutdown. He's going to try to insist on no more aid to Ukraine. I don't know how well they'll be able to hold the line on that. But, that position is going to start becoming more politically viable every day. And it's going to pay off more and more every day that this goes on, especially when you see, like the subsidization of the entire Ukrainian ecosystem, basically, from their exports to obviously, that woman had her knitwear business. At a certain point, I think people are going to think, hey, where's ours? What about us? And I don't know how much longer it will be politically viable to keep sending all of this money, because at a certain point, that nationalist argument that these Freedom Caucus ballbusters are making is going to start winning the day more and more and more. It already is winning the day more and more. At the beginning of the war, support for Ukraine was 70%. Now it's down to 48%, just a year and change later. At this same pace, it'll be down under 30% by the time we go to vote next November. And so I think the fact that 60 Minutes, which is hardly an anti-establishment program, did a piece like that highlighting the fact that, hey, it's not just the military aid. Look at the assistance that we're giving to the people of Ukraine when people here get almost none of that same help.
Okay, I got to say, just to do a little bit of media analysis and history here. So CBS, ironically, is an also-ran in the news business. They've never really been able to get in on the, post-deregulation of the equal time standards gravy train, where everybody went to turning their news divisions into profit centers. CBS, for whatever reason, was never quite able to roll with that change and take advantage of it. But CBS at one time was the gold standard of TV journalism. 60 Minutes is a remnant of that golden age of CBS. Right. CBS was, before you had HBO documentaries and things like that, you had CBS doing these special reports and, really, just really legit television journalism. It's my interpretation of the fact that they seem to be the only real TV news that keeps trying to go after this is there is some element of an awareness of that legacy in the culture of CBS, I find, and particularly around 60 Minutes, because it's the last bit of that. And every now and then they'll try to go off the reservation and do real journalism, relative to other TV stations.
Right.
So So I feel like that's what's going on here, because they're the only ones who keep. You remember they tried to do a report about the weapons, and then they pulled it.
Right. That was them. That's right. That's right. You know, I forgot about that. Yes,
that's what I'm saying. This is a pattern where like they still feel like they need to uphold that legacy of being legitimate journalists in some way, particularly where 60 Minutes is concerned. So just an interesting side note there on the fact that it's only CBS who keeps trying to do these stories about where our money is going and what's going on inside Ukraine. Nobody else wants to even touch this subject. But in terms of what's going on there itself, yeah, you know, if the American people were fat, happy, and prosperous, you know, this isn't the first time by any means that we've dumped billions of dollars into another nation with questionable government institutions and leaderships to prop up its military or its society. I mean, we do that all over the world, just not in such a visible and extreme way. But the American people are suffering. We just saw the poverty rate increased at the fastest clip in American history. Yep. And in that context, when you tell people you're not only paying for weapons, you're giving money to small businesses and helping them find overseas buyers. How are the American people not going to say, well, why not us? And you're right. You know, as far as they're concerned, fuck the American people in the ear. They wouldn't do it anyway.
Right. Austerity is the MO anyway.
Right. But it really brings into sharp relief. And you see that more and more. You see that argument. Like, we're doing things for the Ukrainians that we would never do for the American people. And even if, setting aside how you feel about the war and whether we should be involved in this, that's an argument you really can't get around, because it is exposing how sick, corrupt, and abusive our government is. Because anytime our government demonstrates, as it did during COVID, that in the end, all of its excuses for the things that it can't do are excuses. That exposes it for the really illegitimate, I would argue, government that it is. It's not a legitimate democratic government. It's an oligarchy where you get to select from a panoply of people who are approved by wealthy, powerful interests that no one elected. In the end, you're voting for their chosen representatives. You're never voting for the people's representatives, and that's why the people are always last on the government's agenda.
Right. If we could uplift their entire private sector, which is basically what we're doing, for, you know, I would say probably a third of what we've paid them, because most of the money has been to weapons. So let's say it costs us $30 billion to prop up their entire private sector, right? You're telling me we can't have a federal jobs program here at home, but we can find overseas business for a Ukrainian knitwear company, like a mom and pop knitting company? Like, are you serious? Like, at a certain point, doesn't a light bulb have to go off in people's minds? Yeah, it just exposes the lie of austerity here at home. Like, look at all that we can do for a fraction of what is floated as extreme here, you know, by our media, not just conservative media, but liberal media. Also, there was a whole section of this report that I didn't even bother putting in our exhibit. A whole section of this report had to do with oversight of funds. Well, we're going to oversee these funds to make sure that there's no waste. Well, what do you mean, like there's no waste? You mean we wouldn't want our aid going to knitwear companies, right? Like if that's not waste, what is waste? You know what I mean? I mean, there's actual theft, there's actual criminality, which they mention that some of the weapons were, you know, confiscated or intercepted by criminal elements in Ukraine. Maybe the same criminals who went rogue and blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which we'll talk about later in the show. I don't know what they were talking about there, but like, if what we just read about doesn't constitute waste, then what does? Like, what does your oversight even mean if we're using this money in ways that I think a lot of people would already be shocked to learn that the money is being used.
Yeah, like the CBS article, they tried to walk that line. Like they gave the woman the quote, "In war, we must pay taxes. There must be business." And it pointed out that she employs 70 people. So yeah, fair enough. But you're not doing that here, right? Like you can make the arguments that people need that support here. That if you
no, it's
supported
not the woman's fault. I mean, hey, she should take what she can get, obviously, right? No hard feelings against her. It's not about that. Yeah, but it's about what you just said.
And not only that, in terms of a federal jobs program, our infrastructure is fucking falling apart. It's falling apart. America's
it's not like
roads,
there's no demand.
bridges, the Brooklyn Bridge, I think gets a C minus. Do we have to? And sadly, I can answer my own question. I was going to say, do we have to wait until the bridges start falling down? Yes. Right. That's how we do at this point. We're going to wait until there's a horrific tragedy, horribly, it costs, hundreds of lives. And even then, they're going to try to make it about that specific bridge or that specific road. So there is plenty of work for a federal jobs program doing exactly what they were mostly hired to do during the Depression. Go work on infrastructure. Go build the roads and bridges. So it's not like we don't need it. It's not like it would just be make work kind of stuff for people. We really need people to go out and do those things. If we could do this, we could certainly do that. And any time that that's made clear to the American people, it's not good for this government. It just exposes this government as the illegitimate oligarchy that it is.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. We'll take a few super chats, folks. Thank you for all your super chats here. We have 467 here on YouTube, 147 over on Rumble. Nice little Rumble crowd filing in, folks. By the way, we have Jake, our friend and producer, in the booth tonight. Big round of applause for Jake. Jake is fielding Rumble rants and Rockfin tips, so those are super helpful. There's been a lot of talk in our spaces over the past week, given everything that's gone on with YouTube and Russell Brand and things like that. There's been a lot of talk about the necessity of platforms like Rumble, and so if you wanna help bolster that platform and you're over there watching, hit us up with some Rumble rants. That's a great way to support Rumble and to support us being there, because it's very important. We wish we were independently wealthy and can do these shows for free, but alas, we are not and cannot. So the super chats are super helpful, and the Rumble rants are super necessary for us to maintain our presence there. So thank you guys all very much for your help. Pat Donahue, thanks for the €10. The Chinese have the year of the pig and the monkey. 2023 for leftists is without a doubt the year of the sellout. Yes, what a year of the rat, right? They have a year of the rat in China. We call it the year of the rat. Nader, another letdown. Yes, indeed. We will get to that later. That was unbelievable, that op-ed that he wrote. But thank you, Patrick. Abiding, 71. Thanks to the 99-cent super sticker. We appreciate you. Jax Page. Thanks, Jax Page. The Jagoff comedian killed it at the UN. Yes. That was a great speech at the UN from our friend Jimmy Dore. It's funny. I mean, I might mention this again in this segment, so we have it in when we actually cut the clip. But I had no idea he was speaking at the UN. It was just kind of the surprise thing that dropped. And the person who sent me the link was Extra Bulla. And I saw Robert Penner commented on our Patreon post that he thought at first the Jimmy Dore UN speech was some well-executed fake. And I did too. Not because I didn't think Jimmy could speak at the UN, but because it came from Extra Bulla. I thought it was a joke.
Right.
Most links from Extra Bulla are like like some sort of pyramid scheme for some fair trade organic Sumatran coffee bean. And so, I figured that it was one of those things. I figured it was a prank. But then I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't look like a prank. And then I started seeing it surface elsewhere. But yes, we will get to that. Eric Rousseau, thank you very much for the $5. Appreciate it. Cenk, Cedar, and the Vanless boys are fuming with jealousy watching Jimmy speak at the UN. Will the JD haters cover it or not? We will see. We will see. I know we're probably some of the first to cover it.
I would be surprised if they covered that.
Yeah, I would too. Because they don't really cover Nord Stream. They don't cover the foreign policy anyway. So what the hell interest would they have? You know?
Right. Why would they cover it?
Right, exactly. Bonzo Beans. For $1. My debit card got blocked on Monday after lots of $1 payments to Apple Inc. at 3 a.m. Oh, because you pay through Apple Pay for the Rumble app? Is that why? Yeah, you hit us up with a bunch of $1 super chats last time. Well, you could save time and inconvenience by just, hitting up with, maybe make it one $10 super chat. And then beautiful. Boom.
Listen,
good to go.
Bonzo being clearly you need to go with a bank that has more patrons who visit strip clubs in the middle of the night.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It sounds like you have a very prudish bank there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the 21st century, right? Get with it. Get with it. Donald grabbing by the pussy Trump asks, will you be covering the whole Canadian Parliament Nazi fiasco? We did that actually on our Patreon show on Monday because it broke just in time for that. We figured by today it would be kind of old news. But a great way to see that would be to sign up to our Patreon. We're doing another patron show tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. And we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But right now, why don't we go into segment number 2? This is a story, folks, that so far has been broken by the Daily Mail and picked up by the New York Post. No one else seems to want to touch this, but it seems the Daily Mail, according to their source, Michelle Obama, to get a check for $741,000 for a 1-hour speech about diversity and inclusion at the Munich conference. The former First Lady will be paid 700,000 euros for her appearance at the Bits and Pretzels Founder Festival. Organizers said Obama had topped the list of people that participants wanted to take part year after year. Her husband, former President Barack Obama, had also previously spoken at the festival in 2019. Michelle Obama raked in nearly $750,000 for a 1-hour speech at a tech fair in the southern German city of Munich on Monday, DailyMail.com has learned. The 59-year-old picked up the eye-watering check for speaking to a startup event held on the sidelines of the annual Oktoberfest Beer Festival, 2 sources close to the conference organizers said. According to the event's webpage, the ex-attorney was set to speak to some 5,000 attendees on how to push past self-doubt while discussing the importance of inclusivity and diversity. The Harvard graduate will be paid 700,000 euros for her appearance at the 3-day Love-In for European Entrepreneurs, which is the rough equivalent of $741,000. They really pulled out all the stops to get her, said one person close to the team behind the annual Bits and Pretzels Forum. It's one of the highest fees they have ever paid. That sum is nearly double what Biden earns in a year as president. And by the way, folks, I will just make mention because this stat is fresh in our heads because we just did a segment on the poverty rate increasing last year. Not only did the poverty rate increase this year, but the median income decreased by $2,000 to now about $74,000. So her 1-hour speech on diversity and inclusion netted her 10 times what the median earner earns here at home in 1 year for a 1-hour speech. Axios previously reported that Michelle Obama could be booked for $200,000 while her husband costs $400,000. Those are the usual fees. Her fellow speakers include Oliver Kahn, a former German soccer star turned entrepreneur. The Bits and Pretzels conference is set over 3 days and hears from founders of national and international companies that tell their success stories, as well as guest speakers like Michelle Obama. So, we did the story on Ibram X. Kendi last time, where, his grift, his diversity grift was exposed for what it is. How can anybody, let's say the report is wrong. Let's say it's half that. Let's say it's $200,000. And I don't think it is because there were 2 sources that confirmed this to the Daily Mail. They also reached out for comment from Michelle's team and did not hear anything back. You'd think this would be something they would deny if the number were wrong. The fact that they feel confident enough putting that out tells me it's almost certainly accurate. $741,000 for a 1-hour lecture, and you still have people believing that the Obamas are on their side, that the Obamas are, all for the empowerment of the ordinary person. It's just what an obscene slap in the face. It's just so unbelievably pathetic.
Yeah, well, it's to modify the old saying, if they didn't have identity politics, they'd have to invent it. All of this, when you look at this, and I've never heard of this particular festival, but it sounds like it's one of those, satellite Davos things like the Aspen Institute and South by Southwest. It's all that, tech bro, we're changing the world and we're doing good by doing well, and all the shit that Gera Hardis gets into in Winners Take All. It's this whole circle jerk of ridiculously rich people telling themselves that they're saving the world by being rapacious entrepreneurs. And they need people like Michelle Obama to make that grift convincing, even for themselves, right? Here's this very, prominent, not white, that's the important part, and female, I mean, that's the whole thing, person who's basically co-signing our worldview, co-signing our project. A lot of, this is going to sound a little bit like a left turn, but it's actually related. A lot of what people have been discussing in the course of this entertainment strike, it's really kind of brought to the surface. Part of the reason the public has almost had a certain schadenfreude about the strike rather than any support for it is, so much of what's come out of Hollywood has seemed to just hate at least half the country, right? It's been this very activist kind of thing, particularly at Disney, which bothers people a lot because they are the holders of the legacy of so many cultural touchstones at this point. Through acquisitions, they've almost bought up our entire cultural legacy. This is a result of what Gera Hardis talks about, that this whole thing is a part of. You have a whole generation that got taught at schools, particularly elite schools, that the way to change the world was not to go into politics or social work. It was to go inside these corporations that actually run things,
right,
and be activists within these corporations. So they went to places, they went to Hollywood, among other places, and when you hand them Snow White, they're not going to do Snow White. That's not what they're there for, right? They're there to change America through this corporate structure. So they're going to do this, completely revisionist thing. That's what Michelle Obama is there to represent and to justify and to promote. This understanding of change as being purely limited to shuffling around the identity groups. I know some people inside that corporate world and, who are not, white. And their view is really limited to the idea that you need to diversify these corporations. You need to diversify the executives, and you need to, have more diversity. There is no critique of capitalism amongst that class, amongst these people. Like when you talk to diverse people who are working within these corporations, it's very much with that activist mindset, but that activism has been purely channeled into the idea that you just have to diversify the people who manage capitalism. That's the only problem, because that's what their schools have taught them to limit their concept of activism to. There is no class critique. There is no economic critique. That's what Michelle Obama represents, and something that and that's what the Obamas represent generally. I would argue she sells it better I would argue she's more likable than he is. She's very charming, right? She's very warm. She's very seems very approachable. I would argue she's more likable in that role than he is. It's a little depressing because with Michelle Obama, I mean, this is true with Barack too. It seems like people really don't understand any of that about who she is and where she's coming from. And that's what makes her such an effective spokesmodel for the Aspen Institute understanding of philanthropy and the proper order of the world, because she's good at it. She's really good at it. In that article, it talks about how popular she is. What is it, like 15% of people don't like her?
Yeah, she's got like a 77% overall favorability rating, which is why I mean, that was the other thing. That's what made that Morning Joe segment so ridiculous. Oh, yeah, Kamala Harris is not popular because she's a black woman. Yeah, that's why Michelle has a 77% approval rating and Biden's at 39. You know what I mean? That's what makes that so insane. But you mentioned how, they have an understanding of change that is viewed through this lens, and that's absolutely a huge part of it. Another part of it, though, goes beyond just an understanding of change. They undergo this redefining of process. So what I mean by that is a re-explaining or this sort of alternate theory to how change is actually brought about. Change is not brought about through strong moral statements, brief and very clear moral statements, such as Martin Luther King, not judged by the color of your skin, but by the content of your character. That says everything you have to say about diversity and inclusion. Schmuck that he was, he put it in 15 words. What's that worth? About 65 cents? No, you got to fill an hour, baby. That's how you get 741 grand. You need to be able to fill an hour 100 times. You give 100 speeches for 700 grand a pop, now you're in the money. This guy goes out there for free, mind you, and says people need to be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. There's no money in that. There's no money in that because guys like Martin Luther King were for real, and people like the Obamas are full of shit, Martha's Vineyard dwelling phonies. And so that's the big difference. And that's why it's not just that their understanding of change has sort of evolved very conveniently for them, but it's the way they articulate political progress. It's their vision of progress as something very, very intellectualized, right? To the point where it takes years and years and years to understand and wrap your head around and process, right? The whole thing is a giant filibuster because they have to create, just like Ibram X. Kendi creates fields of study for himself to master and then propagate. Right. The Obamas, what Obama always throughout his tenure insisted that progress was slow, right? It's an imperfect country and progress is slow. Well, that's very convenient for you, right? Because what does that mean? It means you're creating an unsolvable problem. And there's a lot of money in trying to solve unsolvable problems because solving unsolvable problems takes a lot of time, right? Martin Luther King moved very, very quickly, was very, very effective, didn't make a whole lot of money, and of course, things didn't end well for him either, right? So that's how you tell who's for real and who's not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm building on a theme. If the liberal class didn't have the Obamas, they'd have to invent them. And in actuality, they did. Like, you wonder why, in the end, Wall Street decided to back Obama instead of Hillary. This is why. They have done more to legitimize the worst, most psychopathic sectors of society than I would argue anyone else out there. Look at Michelle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What George Bush, she unironically described a war criminal as her partner in crime. Man, I mean, you can't pay for that kind of rehabilitation of the criminal class. Right? I mean, the Obamas are the gift that keeps on giving for the people who made them.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, let's take some more super chats. In fact, before we get to those super chats, I do want to hit our Patreon scroll here. So, folks, as I mentioned before, we had a great patron show on Monday. A lot of people had a lot of fun with that one. Those are all over on Rumble as unlisted Rumble exclusive streams. And so when you join our Patreon community, you get access to those exclusive streams as well as your name up on the credits here. You also get call-in access to all of our regularly scheduled live streams. We just had someone join, actually, because now I get alerts when I get a message from our patron supporters, and we just got another membership here from Jason M. So thank you, Jason. We appreciate that. We'll get you on the scroll. Oops, for the next show. Almost kicked my table over.
Can I just answer a question here?
Yeah, of course.
Somebody's asking, from referencing Hitler saying that if Jews didn't exist, he would invent them himself. The most famous version of that quote, I believe, is if Paris didn't exist, we would have to invent it. So no, I was not.
No, that's a good.
I've never heard that particular.
Good answer. Good answer. Kind of a long preamble. You know, when someone asks if you're referencing Hitler, the best way to answer that is cut straight to no. And then explain. Yeah. Little note going forward. No, but then people say that about Alex Jones, right? If Alex Jones didn't exist, the CIA would invent him, right?
I am almost positive like the original quote is the Paris quote, and then everybody has taken that formulation ever since.
Apparently, including Hitler. Hitler was a plagiarist as well. Who knew?
Yeah, of course he was. He was actually.
What you want about Hitler? I always took him to be an original thinker.
Well, you know whose portrait he had behind his desk?
Was it Jimmy Dore's?
It was. It was not Wagner. It was not Wagner. It was not Goethe. It was Henry Ford. He had a portrait of Henry Ford behind his desk.
That's right. Ford was a big yeah.
He was a big fan of Henry Ford.
Not a fan
Ford,
of our kind, yes.
And no, he was not. And Hitler saw a lot of his organization of society as being modeled on Ford's regularization of production with the assembly line. He saw himself as creating an assembly line society that works in that regimented, orderly way. That's part of why he admired Ford.
Interesting. So in addition to going to Patreon, folks, you can also go to our Substack. People who sign up as paid subscribers on Patreon and Substack, it's the same perks. And even if you can't sign up as a paid member on Substack, please go sign up for free. You get email alerts when we're going live and audio podcast versions of all of these live streams. So thank you guys very much for your support. We'll get to some super chats here. Kuznetsky Bassane, thanks for the $2.99. Appreciate that.
I'm just going to say, Bullet totally creeped me out, and now I realize how he knew where I was staying. Because it's in the mirror behind me.
Oh. What did he say? What did Bullet say?
It's like, I'm stealing that Hotel Sophia Wi-Fi. I was like,
Wi-Fi. Oh. Yeah.
And you know, kind of a tech guy, I was like, how the fuck does he know where I'm staying?
Yeah, right. It's back there. Zig Heil, you hoser, a strange brew reference, says Eric Husso. Thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate that. Alden, thanks for the $2. Hey, guys, first-time caller, long-time listener. Dig the show. Here to support you guys and Rumble. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. A lot of Rumble signups today, which is good. You know, it's a very tricky thing because you don't want to compete with yourself. Like, you don't want to tell people watch us here and not there, because we want you to watch anywhere and everywhere, right? But we did tweet out, you know, the importance of at least, you know, if you're going to keep watching on YouTube, that's cool. We love YouTube. We're not trying to, you know, leave YouTube anytime soon, but given everything that's been going on, I think a lot more people have caught on this week to just how precarious these big tech platforms are. And so if you can follow us on Rumble, follow us there. This way, at least you got a backup place to hang out and catch us. Rumble.com/do dissidence. So thank you guys very much. We'll take a few more super chats before we move on. Got a few more in here. Yasim Miller, thank you for the $10. Unfortunately, Americans don't know much about the Mediterranean, Aegean religions. Climate and the food are the best You literally feel the unbearable lightness of being. What do you say to that, Russell? You agree?
I have said, although I think it's a little unfair to make the comparison because of the difference in where I've gone, the Greeks definitely seem happier and more laid back and more relaxed. But it basically, in Italy, I went to these 3 main tourist spots. And being from New York, that's always going to make people cranky when they're constantly overrun by tourists. With Greece, I kind of went through the islands, which is the equivalent of the countryside, before I'm going to Athens. Now, if people are going to be more uptight, it's going to be in Athens, right? Out here, how uptight could you be? I mean, you're on this beautiful...
Yeah, I mean, life is good, right?
Right? I will say this, in terms of the mythology, this has definitely crossed my mind. Yeah, man, you go in that ocean, you feel like you're in Poseidon's ocean. You feel like you're in this just ancient part of the world steeped in myth and history. You definitely feel that around you and the energy, like there's this consciousness of this, just ancient history of the land that you're on and the people who are on it, and they're very conscious of it. It's all around you. So yeah, it's very interesting. And I mean, more broadly, and I talked about this, I think, a little on the last show. I talked about it more on the Patreon show. Yeah, I mean, America's a fucking shithole, man. I haven't gone anywhere.
I think we've talked a lot about that on the show. Generally, yes. I think we I think we generally touch on that quite often.
No, I mean, coming out here.
Yeah,
and I mentioned, I don't know if it was on the Patreon or on the main show. I've never left America without feeling an oppressively bad vibe lift anywhere I've ever gone.
Right.
And I'm not saying, I'm not naive enough to think, there are places that are conflict zones, famine zones. I've never gone anywhere like that. But of the places I've gone, and certainly advanced industrial economies, America's a fucking shithole. Like, no place is like that. No place is as tense, as angry, as afraid, as dysfunctional. And, something I've wanted to mention also, both of these trips, ahead of the trip, we had a lot of people talking about how dangerous where I was going was. India, you could understand it, but I had it with Italy too. You had a lot of people, oh yeah, my friend went there and got pickpocketed. Oh, my friend went there and got in a fight and got arrested. You get all shit like that. America really, even for people who are liberal and left and open-minded, you're so constantly stewing in this atmosphere of paranoia. And because you're cut off from the world, it's very easy to make Americans feel like it's dangerous out there. If you go out there, things are going to happen to you. Motherfucker, you live in America. You're talking about other places being dangerous? I got news for you. No place else you go is there a constant drone of mass shootings going on in the back.
People aren't getting shot left and right anywhere but here.
Yeah. You're in America. You're talking about that place is dangerous.
Yeah, that place is dangerous. Right, yeah, exactly.
Listen, man, it's not like I was really seeking out the most dangerous places. But one of the funniest things to me in India was how much safer I found it than America. Because Americans, when they think of India, Americans are very, oh my God, they're very fearful of the idea. It must be very dangerous. No, man, you're living in as advanced industrial economies go. If you're in America, you're not going to go anywhere that's within that category that is more dangerous than where you live. By far. And you look at the statistics, violent deaths, gun violence, infant mortality, poverty. America's a shithole. So if you're afraid to travel because you think you're going to get pickpocketed in Italy, don't let that be the reason.
It is 9:02. Oh no, are we about to lose our audience to the lame, irrelevant Republican debates? Are you all going to stay here, or are you going to jump ship to watch the stupid debate? Nobody go anywhere. We have a better show than the debate, I promise. Cool Blue, thanks for the $4.99.
From the maiden.
Exactly. Only 60 from the maiden. That's right. Well, we have 200 over on Rumble now, about 195. So we're technically past the maiden, but
how does that work? What's our call? Do we have what's our policy?
I mean, we'll play it by ear, but we got to give it a chance to at least pass it in the YouTube. So hit that like button wherever you're at. Cool Blue, thanks for the $4.99. I sense people stop referring to Ralph Nader, who was pushing for the Democratic Party vote support in 2022. At least 5 years ago. This is good. Yes, we will get to that. We will get to that shortly, my friend. Paul Chu, member chat. MLK missed the grift. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what I said. Alrighty, folks, let's move on to segment number 3. I guess it was last night that Extra Bulla, friend of the show, messaged me a video that said Jimmy Dore had spoken at the UN. And because Extra Bulla sent it to me, I assumed it was either a prank or a joke or like one of the, deep fake videos that are going out there. Because we know our friend Warren has plenty of jokes and tricks up his sleeve, but it looked pretty real. And then I started seeing tweets surface, and then finally this morning, Steph tweeted out a video, and then Jimmy tweeted out a video. So apparently, yes, Jimmy Dore was invited to speak remotely to the United Nations Security Council on the 1-year anniversary of the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. His address lasted about 10 minutes. We have the first few minutes here, so let's give this a look.
I thank Mr. Podman for his briefing. I now give the floor to Mr. Jimmy Dore.
Greetings, Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council. I'm here to speak today about the attack on the Nord Stream pipeline that took place 1 year ago on September 26, 2022. 4 explosions ruptured the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines that carried natural gas from Russia to Europe. It was the biggest act of industrial sabotage in human history, severing the main artery for energy from Russia to Germany, cheap energy that was critical to maintaining Germany's industrial base. We have heard every cockamamie and ridiculous theory on how this happened. Now, you don't need to be a genius investigative reporter to figure out who was the culprit of the Nord Stream attack. Incredibly, most Western news outlets ignore the fact that the President of the United States, Joe Biden himself, announced on February 9th, 2022, that he would in fact attack the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, saying, and I quote, "If Russia invades Ukraine, tanks crossing the border again, there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We will bring an end to it. I promise you, we will be able to do it."
Now, once again, not to interrupt, we'll let the rest of this play in just a second. February 9th, 2022, 2 weeks prior to the invasion, you have an advanced statement by Joe Biden himself saying exactly what he just said. He said 2 weeks prior to the Russian invasion. Here we go.
Even with that pre-admission of guilt from the President of the United States, most of the Western press remained baffled as to who could have pulled off the greatest act of eco-terrorism in history. But luckily, we don't have to rely on my interpretation of President Biden's clear threat to attack the pipelines. We actually have Seymour Hersh, a genius investigative reporter with impeccable reputation and credentials, who reported that in June of 2022, United States Navy divers operating under the cover of a widely publicized summer NATO exercise known as Baltops 22 planted the remotely triggered explosives that 3 months later destroyed 3 of the 4 Nord Stream pipelines, according to a source with direct knowledge of the operational planning. And like all criminals, the perpetrators could not contain their elation over committing the crime. Shortly after the attack, many high-ranking U.S. officials could not help but brag about their achievements and expressed multiple times how they were proud of being able to put an end to the pipelines. Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland said, "I am, and I think the administration is, very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea." The United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken called it a tremendous opportunity to once and for all remove the dependence on Russian energy.
Now, keep in mind, before I play the rest of this, we have about 1 minute left. The initial reaction from the press, the initial official story, was not one of confusion. Who could have done this? Originally, we said Russia did it. Don't forget. So at the same time, you had Nuland and Blinken celebrating this as a defeat for Russia. The media was saying, well, the Russians must have blown up their own pipeline. All right, here we go. We got 1 more minute.
You have to be a paid liar to not acknowledge the hand of the United States in carrying out these attacks. Not only did President Biden declare he would do this, but high-ranking U.S. officials have said similar things for years. We can look to 2014 when former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice stated that over the long run, you simply want to change the structure of energy dependence. You want to depend more on North American energy platforms, which is what this is really all about. An economic war between the West and Russia in order to fill the pockets of rapacious capitalists who actually pull the strings of the U.S. government and dictate foreign policy.
All right, so that was about the first 4 minutes. Like I said, he goes on for about 7 minutes more. I recommend that you guys all watch the same thing. It's on Jimmy's feed, it's on Steph's feed, and it's also several places on YouTube now. So it's pretty easily located. I'll put a link to the full piece in the description of this video once the stream is over. But it's just amazing how this is not a single issue campaign or a single issue on which to evaluate Joe Biden. You know, Jimmy has called him an eco-terrorist. Nick Cruz has called him an eco-terrorist. That's what this was. I mean, this was a terrorist act. This was an act of war against our own NATO ally. Germany is a NATO ally. Ukraine is not. So how does attacking the critical infrastructure of an official ally in order to isolate them from a critical supplier of a vital resource and therefore make them more dependent on more expensive resources from other countries, Western countries, how does that not constitute an act of war? That's eco-terrorism. That's economic terrorism. I mean, just that single deed alone should have everybody with any claim to any left bona fides whatsoever immediately disqualify Joe Biden. And then you got these fucking clowns running around. Well, he gave a good general counsel on the NLRB. You know what I mean? Like what are you talking about? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? How is this not the issue of paramount import? It's just insane. And, you know, I didn't even realize that was 1 year ago. But yeah, 1 year ago, 1 year from now, the story went from, well, the Russians did it, to radio silence, right? And that's how you know the Russians didn't do it right away. Because if the media actually felt the Russians did it, they would have kept saying the Russians did it.
You never heard the end of it.
You would have never heard the end of it if they actually believed the Russians did it.
Russia rigging an election that they didn't rig.
Exactly. For 3 years, they carry on about Russia rigging an election that they didn't rig. They're still talking about that 8 years later. And what, a couple weeks after the destruction of the Nord Stream, they go from, well, Russia did it to no comments to Ukraine did it, but they were rogue Ukrainian actors with no connection to the Ukrainian government. And certainly the United States had no knowledge of it. That's the official story now. I mean, how unbelievably gullible do you have to be to buy any of that? But this just also proves...
You have fishing boat, yes?
Right, exactly.
I have great idea. I have old scuba set. We blow a pipeline tomorrow.
Right, exactly. Like that's literally what you would have to believe in order to buy that narrative. That yeah, some rogue Ukrainians did it, but the U.S. Nor Ukraine had any direct knowledge.
Well, you made a good point. We were talking about this. Well, if Ukraine blew up the pipeline, Germany is in NATO and they're not. Isn't that Ukraine committing an act of war against NATO? That's why they have to frame it as they were Ukrainians but non-governmental actors, right? Because if they were governmental actors, that's technically an act of war. We should be attacking Ukraine.
Of course. Right? Yes. Yes. Just as, look, Ukraine is not a NATO ally, right? So if Russia attacked Poland, as Ukraine tried to blame them for, right, when that missile landed in Poland, and Ukraine said Russia did it, and then we find out that Ukraine actually did it, right? If Russia did attack Poland, that would be an act of war against NATO because Poland is a NATO country. And so, yes, in that case, we would have to say that that was an act of war. Well, same thing here. Germany is a NATO country. So an attack on their infrastructure is of course, an act of war. And if Ukraine did it, then that should make Ukraine not only disqualified from joining NATO, now they are an enemy of NATO, right? And so it makes no sense. But of course, look, the idea that Ukraine did it is also fucking bullshit. We obviously did it. Joe Biden said 2 weeks before
he said we were
going to do it. Right. So to even take seriously that the Ukrainian government did it or the Ukrainian military did it is nonsense. Obviously, we did it. That's the most obvious thing in the world. And good on him for calling that out. It was very, very well done. And yeah, I encourage everybody to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, so I pulled up this very famous quote from 1984 because it seems particularly relevant around this particular issue. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. That's what you really see here, right? It is so fucking obvious that the media narrative. That's why they kept having to change it. Because it made so little sense. It was causing too much cognitive dissonance, even amongst their audience of lobotomized libs. So that they changed it to Ukrainian rogue actors because the Russian angle, just because of what it cost Russia, they couldn't sustain it, right? Or they felt they couldn't sustain that, even with their completely incurious audience. So then they shifted to these Ukrainian rogue actors. And as you point out, the way they've mostly approached it is not to talk about it. And, you mentioned how these people who are talking about the NLRB, and that's why you've got to back Joe Biden, they don't talk about this. Well, you know what? The media makes it really easy for them not to talk about it because there's alternative media and there's alternative media. Alternative media is the gray zone where they're going to talk about this shit. They're going to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. That's exactly the purpose of alternative media. And then you have people who couldn't or didn't want to try to get ahead through the normal corporate media channels because there's a lot of competition in that lane and decided they could actually make more money and run their own thing if they go on YouTube and present themselves as some kind of alternative media. But that's not alternative media, and that's why their conversation about current events is framed within a similar boundary, right? There are places they're not going to go. They're not going to really emphasize that. They only track what the corporate media is emphasizing, and here and there give you a little bit of critique of the media to maintain the notion that they're really different, but they're fundamentally not, as you can see from commentators who are running around talking about how you have to vote for Joe Biden because of the NLRB and never fucking mention the Nord Stream pipeline. Never mention it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Indeed. Nicole, thanks for the €2. King, I have a dream. Obama, I have a drone. Yes. Very good. I like that one. Good one. Splash of Socialism, Laura Hodge. Hey, Laura, thanks for the donation. I don't like the new scroll because I'm not at the front anymore. Cast to the middle somewhere. Yeah, well, you're L, right? So I think Jake put it in alphabetical order. So that's how that goes. So sorry about that, but you are, at least you're in the first half. I spent my whole life at the back of the alphabet, W. I sat at the back of every classroom, back of every line in elementary school. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I'm a W too.
That's right. You're a W too. Your legal name is W. That's right. So yeah, so you know what it's like. I was about to say Russell's lucky with the D name, but no, that's not your legal name. That's your stage name to keep everybody away from you.
I come by it honestly. It's my mother's maiden name. It is a family name. But
it is a family name. Okay, got it. John Locke, thanks for the $20. Breaking, White House source says Uncle Joe will give us a real new deal if Jill promises to get off his balls about dropping the N-word when he raps in the car. Good scoop. Thank you, John Locke. Appreciate that.
I sent you that. We wound up not covering it. We just called LL Cool J Boy.
Oh, boy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Did you send me that? I did see it, but I don't remember you sending it.
Because the Black Conservative covered it, and what he pointed out about it, which like he corrected himself immediately. For anyone who doesn't know, Biden was doing some event with LL Cool J, and he goes, "Yeah, I tell you that LJ Cool LL, that boy can sing, that man can sing." Like
he immediately caught himself. Yeah, this time.
But he talked about how pumped he is, and Foreman, who's not one to traffic in racial grievance, quite the opposite. Even he was like, he's one step from calling him a strapping buck. He's like, looks like, I'll tell you, that guy's got big arms. Dude, this is the way I always describe Joe Biden with these gaffes. Joe Biden thinks he's racially progressive because his idea of racially progressive is what would be racially progressive for a Democratic politician giving a speech in a VFW hall in Delaware in 1974. Right? By those standards, he's progressive. But his worldview is very much old racist. That's why it doesn't occur to him. Maybe don't go on about the size of the guy's arms and how muscular he is. Right? Yeah. Maybe that has connotation. He doesn't. He thinks he's being complimentary, just like when he described Obama as the first black guy who's articulate and clean. Like he thought he's being progressive. Right.
Exactly. Right.
These are little windows into how he actually thinks when he has these gaps.
Indeed. We're at 6:38, folks. Can we get 28 more in here? We got a big crowd over on Rumble, 296 strong in the Rumble chat. That's amazing. So we're at almost 1,000 overall. But YouTube, let's pick it up. Let's hit that like button. Let's get some more people in here so we get our Iron Maiden drop sooner than later. Orwellian, 1984. Thank you very much. You both are amazing. Well, thank you for the compliment. Appreciate that. Please stay strong and keep putting out the truth. The world needs some ayahuasca. Yes, thank you very much. 296 over in the Rumble chat. Beautiful.
That's my next trip.
Yeah, right. The next trip is ayahuasca. Dwayne Vogel, Nader's Nadir. Very good. Very good. I like that one. So, yeah, I guess you guys have read that Ralph Nader op-ed. We're going to get into that. That's last tonight, but we got a couple more good ones for you before then. And Orwellian has been a member for 1 month now. Beautiful. Will nuclear war finally cancel my student debt? Yeah, looks like that's probably what it's going to take, unfortunately. But we're in the same boat on that one, my friend. So thank you guys for the donations. All right. Here is segment number 4. This was an article that Russell found. So this was an article in Vox. This is a book review of a new book called Tyranny of the Minority by Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt. So this was a book review in Vox that Russell found. And Russell wanted to read through some of the highlights of it. What a brilliant new book gets right and wrong about America's democracy. So Russell's going to read some excerpts from this book review. But do you want to set this up a little better since you found this?
Oh, okay. So there are a lot of maddening articles out there in the ether, and we don't cover them all. This one was such a masterclass in the liberal worldview and its biases and its blindnesses, and also in the absolute uselessness of our academic elites and their credentials, that I felt like it was worth taking a look at. Because if you really want to understand the derivation of Keaton's political cat stare, what that person's brain is incapable of absorbing that leads to a liberal cat stare, you can't do better than this article. So he's reviewing a book. All right, so I don't usually do this on the show because I'm afraid people are going to realize that Clark Kent and Superman are the same person.
He's going to wear his glasses. Because Russell's working off a tablet now, and so it's a little harder for him to see the screen, but here we go.
It's like tiny. So this is Zach Beauchamp. That's a guy from the street if I ever heard one. He's reviewing the book Tyranny of the Minority by Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, both Italians. And our people.
Well, it says here, the first line, according to Levitsky and Ziblatt, which rung a bell because that was actually our working title for this podcast before we came up with a name. We'll call it Levitsky and Ziblatt.
I were like, it'll be the Jewish Rick and Morty.
Exactly. I think we could make a good Levitsky and Ziblatt.
We would. Maybe we should change the name. Maybe we should do it just to troll these guys. Yeah, just steal their names.
Hey, Halloween's coming up. Maybe we should do our Halloween show as Levitsky and Ziblatt. Just do the whole show in character.
and then tweet it to their wives. So they wrote a book arguing that America's founders kind of overcompensated for the fear of majoritarian rule. And they were partly driven by the fact that the only examples of democracies they had were the democracies of the ancient world. And they were very fearful of the precedent that they saw of the mob empowering a tyrant, of democracy actually being vulnerable to the population that you're supposed to be empowering with democracy, to voting away or choosing to dispense with their own democracy by putting a tyrant in charge, by using their power to end democracy itself. So they've written a book that argues that America's institutions, as a result of their fear of majoritarian rule and all of the checks they put on the ability of the majority to get their will enacted, has actually opened up a backdoor for determined minority factions to control the government. And they're arguing that's what the GOP is doing. All of that is true as far as it goes. And that's part of what's fascinating about the article, actually, because it offers prescriptions to reform our system to make it more like other Western democracies that would get rid of a lot of the safeguards that the founders put in that wind up being anti-majoritarian. So things that I think most of us would agree with: getting rid of the electoral college, having proportional representation, basically getting rid of the Senate He's really talking about throwing things to Congress, making gerrymandering illegal. All things that I think most people on the left, and I think most Americans actually agree with. That's not what's so damning about the article, although that's part of what made it interesting to me. Their understanding of America's democracy collapsing is exclusively focused on the idea that white racists are insecure about their loss of status and new groups displacing them. That's it. In an article about why American democracy is collapsing, never once does he use the word economy, economics, labor. Never, not once. The entire fucking article never discusses any possibility that there could be something flawed about our economic system that's causing this. He never mentions trade deals. He never mentions, not even the way liberals will sometimes, in that these are forces of nature that can't be controlled. It's globalism. What can you do? Not even on that level. Just pretends that there is absolutely no reason American democracy is collapsing other than racists. So let's take a look. According to Levitsky and Ziblatt, today's America is currently being sucked down the anti-democratic whirlpool. The Republican Party, they argue, has become an anti-democratic institution. Its traditional leadership, cowed by Trump, and a racially reactionary base. As such, it is increasingly willing to twist legal tools designed to check oppressive majorities into tools for imposing its policy preferences on an unwilling majority. The best way out of this dilemma, in their view, is radical legal constitutional reform that brings the American system more in line with other advanced democracies. Levitsky is a Latin America specialist who, along with co-author Lucan Way, wrote a prescient analysis of a new style of autocracy back in 2002, a system they termed competitive authoritarianism that subsequently emerged as the premier institutional means for turning a seemingly stable democracy into an autocracy. See Hungary. Competitive authoritarian governments masquerade now listen to this. Competitive authoritarian governments masquerade as democracies, even holding elections with real stakes. But certainly there's nothing like that going on here. But these contests are profoundly unfair. The incumbent party ensures that the rules surrounding elections, like who gets to vote and what the media gets to say, are heavily tilted in their favor. The result is that the opposition has little chance to win elections, let alone pass their preferred policies. Okay, so if you broaden that out to two parties, well, you're describing America. You're describing the way that our system works. Just ask Cornell. Just ask Ralph Nader before he got his mind right about how the American system allows opposition to the dominant party narratives, allows opposing voices to challenge that system. Just ask anyone who's tried to run outside that system about freedom of the press and how the media does not do the bidding of that duopoly. So they're arguing now with Hungary. Tucker recently did that interview with Orban, which I found the interview pretty interesting. I honestly don't know enough about how true the claims that he's making about how things work in Hungary are to comment one way or the other. But I will say what he's describing, if you just replace the idea of it being one party with two parties, you just described how the American system works, right? We have two parties that control media coverage, and that cannot be opposed. And they have real elections with real stakes. There really is a contest between Democrats and Republicans. But beyond that, you really don't have any choice. And who they put up is very circumscribed by the interests of the elites that control both parties. You have anything there, Kay?
No, go ahead.
So not only was America no longer overwhelmingly white, there's another section. Not only was America, this is their explanation, this is their sole explanation for why democracy is threatened. Not only was America no longer overwhelmingly white, but once entrenched racial hierarchies were weakening. Challenges to white Americans' long-standing social dominance left many of them with feelings of alienation, displacement, and deprivation, Levitsky and Ziblatt write. Many of the party's voters feared losing their country, or more accurately, their place in it. This, they say, is what made the party vulnerable to conquest by someone like Trump. America's minoritarian institutions certainly create a particular pathway for our domestic revanchist faction to gain power and wield it against democracy. But there are plenty of other ways for a democracy to eat itself. That section is absolutely remarkable to me. That is really remarkable. To literally not give any explanation for what made the Republican Party vulnerable to Trump other than racial grievance. Trump won on the Rust Belt. To not at all indicate that economic dislocation had anything to do with Donald Trump. It's amazing. And also, if you actually go back and read this article, he cannot invoke the credentials of the authors enough. He cannot mention Harvard enough in this article, which is another mainstay of liberal pontification on American politics, right? They love to appeal to credentials and institutions, and if people come from Harvard, Yale, right, they are to be respected, they are to be taken seriously. And what's really revealing about that is this tells you how little fucking clue the people who have been elevated to positions of power. This is not trivial. These people get to make decisions. These people are called into government all the time to advise. They're very often given cabinet appointments, people who are drawn from these backgrounds. This is their understanding of the problem in the country. I don't think they're making it up. I don't think they're sitting around in a room going, yeah. This is what these fucking people believe.
Well, to a certain extent, I mean, to a very large extent, they're actually correct in the sense that a lot of these problems that they talk about actually lead to a certain unofficial tyranny that benefits the upper echelon, which is them, right? So it's not like what they're saying is factually wrong. It's just that their perspective is completely twisted. I actually wrote an article about this way back when we used to write articles about how really if you wanted an out-of-control rapacious oligarchy, this sort of American experiment is really the perfect test tube to create one in, because you have a country founded on, economic freedom, which was basically a revolution led by colonized elites against the people who they were paying up to. Right. So you have a revolution of the elite class, and underneath that elite class, you have this melting pot of people from different cultures and different backgrounds who are going to, if history is any guide, have a tough time getting along. And so they will always be at each other's throats in a way that distracts them from coming for any of your money or your power at the top, whether that is the sort of political elite class or the economic sort of upper crust. And so in a sense, yes, they are right. Like, America is ripe for tyranny, just not the kind of tyranny that they're talking about. The tyranny that actually they benefit from tremendously is the tyranny that they're talking about. But this next segment of the article is sort of a little bit of a left turn that they take, where they uphold a certain other country as an example of democracy in action. So why don't you give this slide a read here?
Yeah, it just keeps getting better. So to demonstrate a country that is quite the opposite, that has a majoritarian bias, they invoke the nation of Israel. Israel, for example, has an extraordinarily majoritarian political system. They're describing an apartheid state as a state with a surfeit of democracy.
Right.
It is a parliamentary democracy, meaning limited separation of executive and legislative power, whose legislature is elected on a purely proportional basis. There is a simple majority requirement for passing legislation and even amending the basic law. It's constitution light. The judiciary is, for all intents and purposes, the only check on unfettered majority rule. Yet Israel is at the moment in the midst of a democratic crisis every bit as serious as America's, perhaps even more so, in which an anti-democratic governing majority seeks to remove the court as a barrier to its radical agenda. The root cause of the crisis is very similar: a far-right faction of the population that wishes to protect existing social hierarchies from the threat of change. Now, what's really fucking amazing is they managed to talk about all this with West Bank, occupied territories. What is it that this radical majority wants to do, and who do they want to do it to? This disenfranchised population within this supposedly model for majoritarian democracy. This really demonstrates how worthless the opinions of the people who are paid to offer opinions on the pages of places like Vox and on your cable news channels, how worthless these fucking people are, how worthless these experts are, because this is something Norm Finkelstein really gets into. If you have gotten tenure at Harvard, you probably have nothing to say worth saying, because you wouldn't get appointed at Harvard if you did, right? He talks quite a lot about the way they weed out anybody who has any views that are in any way challenging. So yeah, Israel is a model majoritarian democracy, and there's nothing wrong with America other than racists who are afraid of progress. This is why a lot of conservatives, but also radical leftists, like to invoke that very creepy video that was released by Davos a few years ago. You will own nothing and be happy. Because when you look at the vision that these people seem to have, it's that the majority of the population will survive on very little money, and that'll be okay as long as they're not racist. Right?
Hang on one second. Stop. We hit it before, but then we dropped below, so now
we did, and then we dropped. Yeah, people. I guess Vivek is saying something incredibly compelling. We had that drop, and then people said, it's boring, and they came back. Yeah. So moving along, while Levitsky and Zablat ultimately take an institutions first approach, seeing their reform as our way out of America's crisis, I take a more society first view, that America's problems are primarily the result of deep social fissures exacerbated by outdated and poorly designed institutions. None of those, editorial note, none of those being economic, you'll notice. None of those being the way the economy works. Even if the United States had a more authentically democratic institution, we'd still be riven by divides over race and identity that have unerringly produced the worst political conflicts in the country's history. It's like this guy's never heard of labor. He's never heard, right. You never heard of fucking strike breakers being beaten by hired goons on lines. You've never heard of mass labor protests. You've never heard of Bleeding Kansas. Like you've never heard of any of these things. It's just amazing that he could write that sentence. I mean, it's not that obviously some of our bloodiest and worst conflicts have been around that, but not all of them and not exclusively. I mean, it wouldn't stick out so much if in this article he talked at all about economics and labor. This is a necessary fiction that they have to present in order to justify the privileges of the people who pay them. Again, like if you're in a position where you're pontificating like this on Vox and you have a book deal to pontificate like this for 300, 400 some odd pages, which this guy does, he says in the article he has his own book coming out, you're probably not somebody with anything to say worth saying. So it follows from this that institutional reforms are not enough. In addition to policies for political reform, we also need to think about ways to reduce the social demand for extreme politics. More bluntly, if widespread hostility to social change enables the GOP's far-right authoritarian lurch, we need to figure out ways to shift Americans' beliefs in a more egalitarian direction. Now that gives up the game right there. That is the heart of the matter right there. You want to understand why these liberals are so gung-ho on censorship, why they don't have any problem with censorship. Well, if this is your view of the world, censorship naturally proceeds from it, right? Because these right-wingers are so paranoid, thinking the libs want to throw them all in re-education camps. Well, it sure sounds like if you could get away with it, you would. Look at this understanding of the world. If you believe there are no problems in the country other than reconstructed racists, and that's it, and we just have to educate people and that's the word they often use. We need to educate people, teach them not to be racist. If you think that's the only problem, well, what's not justified?
Well, it also, they want to educate people into believing that the systems that they describe in part and prop up fully in that piece are just the right systems, whether or not the systems can actually prove to ordinary people that they're the right systems for them. Right? In other words, we just have to convince people that these are the right systems, even if they don't feel like the right systems because you're not benefiting from them. We have to make them understand that they have some cosmic obligation to pledge loyalty to egalitarian systems and majoritarian systems, while in that Israel example, never acknowledging the pitfalls of the majoritarian systems either.
And to use the term egalitarian, completely divorced from any economic connotations.
Well, right.
That is liberalism in a nutshell. There is only one kind of egalitarianism, diversity. And that's what I was starting to say before. It's the Davos thing. You will own nothing and be happy. Like this vision, where does it go? Okay, so the majority of the population is impoverished but deeply anti-racist.
Right.
And that's the system working.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It's a very diverse and broadly impoverished population with an elevated elite made up of people like themselves living very comfortably and dictating morals to the rest of the people. That is their vision. And they are so ensconced in the notion of their own moral virtue and the virtue of their vision. This goes back to what we were talking about with Michelle and all this. It's that whole doing good by doing well thing. They can't imagine why they're so loathed and despised by most of the population when it's quite evident why they are so despised. They are as out of touch an elite aristocracy as ever existed in pre-revolutionary France at this point.
Indeed. All right, let's take some super chats and we'll move on. Marta K, thanks for the $1.99. And unbelievable, you say, for another $1.99. Ralph Nader calls to vote for Biden. Yeah, that Nader piece had a lot of legs. That's last. We got 2 more segments on the evening, folks. But thank you very much all for being here. MK Ultra is a hell of a drug. Thank you, DC. Appreciate that. Meteor Dreams. Pasta's not well liked at the JD show. Yikes. What makes you say that? I think he's doing a good job. I think the show works very, very well. I like the chemistry. Why? Are you reading bad reviews? Is there an industry paper I should be reading?
That's what
the variety of the YouTube space? Yeah. The Village Voice? Who? According to who? I think he's doing fine. Views seem to be good. Yeah, seems to be a good show to me.
Getting good feedback on that.
Yeah. All righty. Ben Wise, this is my dad. Need Patreon email that allows call-in. I sent you the call-in link in addition to the Patreon email, so I don't know if you're still having an issue. I remember last time my dad called in, it was a big thing. But I sent you the email. I don't know if you're still watching, but I emailed you the backup link too, directly from our streaming software here. All right, let's take some more super chats in a little bit, but let's do this segment here because this is a fun one, folks. So it made news this week, and we covered it on our Patreon show on Monday, that a few of Rumble's most prominent advertisers, including Burger King and HelloFresh, pulled their ad dollars from the platform in response to the Russell Brand allegations. And Rumble's defiant refusal to sort of demonetize and or expel Russell Brand from their site. So Glenn Greenwald happened to be off most of last week due to a health issue, he said. But it's great that he's back and glad he could make it back to do this next segment because he chimed in earlier this week on the censorship industrial complex and how some so-called journalists actually participate in pressure campaigns to censor their peers under the guise of, reporting and information gathering, right? So here's him starting to talk about how this works, how it really works where, okay, a reporter from a major outlet will reach out to sponsors of a creator or sponsors of an event by a problematic person and say, hey, are you aware that X person is problematic for X and Y reasons? And have you thought about what it means for your company to be sponsoring this person or this platform that hosts this person, right? It's very, very sneaky, and it takes a journalist's eye to sort of see through it, and Greenwald goes off here. So let's take a look.
This is how these corporate media outlets and these fake journalists, under the guise of reporting, instead engage in liberal activism all the time. It's how they become the leading censorship activists. They call up Facebook or Google and they say, hey, we notice this far-right extremist on your site who's saying all these terrible things and you're allowing him to say it. And we have experts who say that you're doing so endangers marginalized populations. And if you don't ban him, we're going to write about that. And we're going to call your advertisers and we're going to say, are you comfortable with a platform that allows this person? And the whole point of it is to act as activists to get that person banned, censored from the internet while doing it under the pretense, the masquerading guise of reporting.
All right. Now, he goes on to list as an example of this what happened to Dave Portnoy. Now, Dave Portnoy, Barstool Sports, right? There was recently an example where he was going to host an event and he had a Washington Post reporter call up sponsors of that event and basically try to get them to pull out. And so let's take a look at what he references there in this clip right here.
This is Emily.
Hey, Emily, this is Dave Portnoy calling. I'm recording you right now, but I've noticed a bunch of people. It seems like you're sending, we have this pizza fest happening on Saturday, and you're reaching out to our advertisers, and you're basically sending an email that says to the effect, Dave's a misogenic racist. Do you want to defend yourselves advertising at this event, right?
I'm sorry, what's your name, Dave? I'm sorry, who are you?
I'm the guy you're writing the article about, Dave Portnoy.
Oh, you're Dave Portnoy. Oh, hey, how are you?
Good.
Good. No, I'm not. I haven't said anything like that.
I can read if you want. If you want, I can read what you actually sent. I have it.
Yeah, read, because I sent a bunch of notes, so I want to make sure I know which one.
Okay. We are planning to write about the festival and how some of the sponsors and participants have drawn criticism by seemingly to associate themselves with Dave Portnoy, who has a history of misogenic comments and other problematic behavior. I want to make sure that Blank had a chance to respond to this, since the company is the most prominent of their partners of his festival.
Oh, that's the one I sent to, which was definitely the most pointed of them, because I really did want them to respond, and I was hoping to get something from them.
Do you think that's fair? Like, I totally disagree with the assertions of what you said, that misogenic and all that stuff. So, like, it kind of backs people into a corner. So I'm happy to go over anything. I mean, you have... That is pretty pointed. You said you didn't do it. Then I have the exact evidence of you doing it. So
no, I didn't say I didn't do that. I said I did. That was the one that
yes,
was the most
did.
Well, no, before I provided proof, you said you didn't really remember doing that, and then I read it to you, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I did it that one time." So you did do it.
All right. So I mean, you kind of get the point here, and then he says, well, you never reached out to me before you reached out to these people. And she said, well, I was going to call you, right? I was actually going to call you tomorrow morning, she says in the call. That's like, when you deliberately duck someone's phone call and then they call you 2 days later and you're like, oh, shit, I guess they didn't forget about it. I guess they wanted a call back and they're probably a little pissed. And you answer like, hey, funny thing, I was just about to call you back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of excuse, right?
Well, and she keeps trying to redirect to that. I would love to talk to you. I would love
to talk to you. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you. Just not right now. Like why wouldn't you why wouldn't you talk right now? I mean, that just makes no sense. But anyway, I want to go back to Greenwald here, because he wasn't done. I just wanted to fill you guys in on what exactly he was saying there. What exactly he was referencing again. But let me get to a different point in this video here. I'll pick it up at 45 seconds.
Of all the companies, only one refuses to comply, and that company then becomes the target of a multi-pronged effort to destroy it, led as usual by the little cretins in the corporate media that call themselves journalists and yet as always are the leading agitator.
Hey, whoa. It's a personal insult against my
Yeah. I am temporarily a cretin.
Russell is temporarily a cretin.
Some might say I'm just finally revealing my cretinity.
Yeah, exactly.
For greater and greater censorship, who step forward to malign the site, to make it toxic to its advertisers, who call up advertisers under the guise of journalism, when in fact what they're trying to do is act as an activist group to scare them away. We just saw with Dave Portnoy when he tape recorded the conversation he had with that Washington Post reporter.
All right, so we just played the conversation, and then here we go.
This is how these corporate media outlets and these fake journalists, under the guise of reporting, instead engage in liberal activism all the time. It's how they become the leading censorship activists. They call up Facebook or Google and they say, hey, we notice this far-right extremist on your site who's saying all these terrible things, and you're allowing him to say it. And we have experts who say that you're doing so endangers marginalized populations. And if you don't ban him, we're going to write about that. And we're going to call your advertisers and we're going to say, are you comfortable with a platform that allows this person? And the whole point of it is to act as activists to get that person banned, censored from the internet while doing it under the pretense, the masquerading guise of reporting.
Okay, sorry, I played that. I already played that already. But yeah, so there you have it. I mean, it's just incredible. And so the same thing that they're doing to Dave Portnoy, which he mentioned there, they're also doing to Rumble, right? And he goes on to mention about how the state got involved. We covered on our Patreon show last Monday about how basically you have the state now passing these online safety bills. But what he was able to pinpoint there, as he mentioned in the Dave Portnoy example, is the degree to which the mainstream media actually takes it upon itself to play censor in this whole game, right? Like, they actually do a lot of the censorship themselves. It doesn't have to come from government, right? You can have this little creep at the Washington Post, trying to get an event canceled or an event pulled by repeating accusations, or in Portnoy's case, it was pretty vague. Hey, did you know he's a misogynist pizza man? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck does that mean? You know what I mean? And they use that.
Dave Portnoy was in Nevada at the same exact time that 3 women disappeared.
Yeah, right.
How do you
exactly. Like, what the fuck? Like, that is just incredible. And then he calls her to try and flesh it out and says, "Oh, well, we were gonna touch base with you. We were gonna get comment from you." Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And so, a guy like Greenwald obviously has the kind of eye to be able to sniff that out. And I thought he did a pretty good job in a pretty fiery monologue. I mean, he said at the top of that monologue, he doesn't usually get that hot when he talks about this stuff, but that kind of brought it out of him.
Well, yeah, we've gone to a place where journalists see themselves as society's hall monitors, and they, in keeping with, these other sectors we've talked about, they no longer see their job as to report. They see it as to reinforce the standards of the elite class. This is, it's interesting. We don't plan it that way as a rule, but very often the shows just fall into having certain themes. And, this is kind of the running theme of this show. We're in the grip of an elite class that believes that it knows best and no longer feels itself bound or restricted by any kind of higher ideals or principles. As I would argue at one time, I'm not saying our institutions ever worked perfectly, but I do think at one time people who say, I don't want to get us in trouble, but say they worked at a government health organization, they would have felt that they can't take de facto bribes from drug manufacturers to come up with certain positions, right? At one time, I think that the FAA, one plane going down would have been enough. It wouldn't have taken several before they acted. And I think at one time, journalists on the whole, with varying degrees of success, believed in the principle of objective journalism, right? If you wanted to be a legitimate journalist, you would never call somebody up and assassinate their character that way. You wouldn't have seen your job as being to basically ostracize people from society. You wouldn't have seen that as your role as a journalist. And now they do. It's a bunch of, Taylor Lorenz is the most extreme example, but they're all Taylor Lorenzes. They're all using using their position and their power as journalists to decide who gets to have a platform, who gets to speak, who gets to thrive, right? And that's where it's this elite class thing. They see what they're doing as moral. Right? It's a moral crusade to enforce the values of their class on society.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing that, is uncovered through this, and what he put very well, which is that, these people have no actual respect, much less reverence for the craft of journalism. Like, they don't actually respect their own industry. It's just a social club to them. They are just career climbers, which, Matt Taibbi has talked about this a lot. Journalists used to be the scrappy sort of, rejects who didn't care if they pissed people off. Right, they were gadflies. They wanted to piss people off. They didn't want to be popular. They actually wanted to, be a thorn in the side of everyone around them, right? Whereas now it's the complete opposite. Now they are gatekeepers of a craft that is really not even a craft anymore at the mainstream level. I mean, what Portnoy was saying in that conversation, and that conversation goes on for about 11 minutes, it gets kind of repetitive because he keeps drilling her on the same exact point. Well, at one point he asks her, he says, I'll talk to you tomorrow morning if you want, but only if I feel I'm going to get a fair shake, because it sounds to me like you've already made up your mind about who I am. Have you already made up your mind about me? And she says, well, no, I haven't. He says, well, then why are you calling the sponsors of the event, telling them, or why are you emailing them and saying, this is a problematic person. How do you feel about sponsoring an event hosted by this guy? Like, if you haven't made your mind up about me, then why are you trying to sabotage my shit? You know what I mean? It makes no sense, because their whole order of operations is completely, perverted. It's completely upside down. Like, they work backwards from the fact that, okay, we have to go after this guy and we'll make up a story around it. Sorry, I got distracted. I don't know if some people were bouncing around in and out of our StreamYard, but that was what that was. Sorry.
Okay.
A bunch of the graphics just went crazy on my end down here. I don't know what. Jake, does everything look good to you? Let me know. It felt like it was a glitch just now.
The entire term problematic, I find highly problematic.
Yes, good
What
point.
is that? It's just a vague way of throwing, an air of unsavoriness on a person without having to be very specific. This person is problematic. Like, that's the first sign you're dealing with a fucking asshole.
Right.
As soon as someone uses the word problematic, asshole.
Right.
You really don't have to go any further.
Yeah, because it's a shorthand for, all kinds of things they can say about you, right? It's a shorthand for all kinds of smears, right? Without actually having to get specific about what they're talking about.
Right. And again, when you look at a lot of the tactics, when you look at a lot of the behavior, it resembles nothing so much as a climate of inquisition, as a climate of religious fear, right? Well, he was seen at the saloon on Sunday instead of going to church. What do you have to say about that? Right? It's all this moral posturing and preening and implication and casting people out based on not conforming to these community standards that you supposedly represent. It's extremely dangerous and blood-curdling. And this is not a term I often use. I would dare say anti-American. It bears the greatest resemblance to our worst moments, like the McCarthy era. That's really what it looks like. The worst moments in American history, where the darkest parts of our character have manifested.
Yeah, because you've centralized all of the decision-making powers, right? So, like, now you only have to convince, like, who made the decision at Google to whack Russell Brand's channel or to throttle that channel, to demonetize that channel? Like, who actually made the call? We don't know. But it seems like there's just fewer and fewer people who are in charge of more and more speech, right? I mean, this is a problem that started with the Telecommunications Act, just the, like, consolidation of media, right, into fewer and fewer hands. So you have more and more power vested in the hands of fewer and fewer people who control, obviously, all of what we basically see and hear in the quote-unquote news. That's why Greenwald is on Rumble. That's why these alternative platforms are becoming more and more important, because even where you go to for quote-unquote independent media, they're only as independent as their platforms will allow them to be. And if the platforms are, Apple and Google, well, then how independent are you at the end of the day? You're really just a freelancer using an app, just like an Uber driver uses an app to make money, giving rides. It's not much different a dynamic there. And so, yeah, I mean, he really was obviously pretty fired up by that. Obviously, Greenwald has made a big investment in Rumble. He switched from Substack to Rumble to go and do his show, so he's obviously has a lot of skin in the game. But, yeah, this has been a real sort of important week where I think the light bulb went off in a lot of people's heads, because we've been saying it over and over again. It's only a matter of time before, all independent media becomes endangered on these big tech platforms. And this whole episode with Russell Brand, whatever you feel about the accusations or, the sort of specifics of that situation, a lot of people have woken up to the fact that, oh yeah, it actually is really dangerous to have all of our quote unquote independent media creators funneled into these same 2 or 3 forums that can just go dark on them without warning or without reason, or because somebody says something about them that has not been tested in any sort of court or any sort of body. No, we just have an accusation and a response. You can do that to anyone you want, right? And so the specifics of the Russell Brand case are kind of irrelevant. The point is that when you have more and more power in the hands of fewer and fewer people, it's easier and easier at that point to shut people down and shut people up, especially if the standard that we've set now is an accusation. That's it.
Right. What I always think of with the internet is, okay, obviously people like us have a show and, you get around the gatekeepers in a way that you couldn't in the past. But at the same time, it reminds me of the classic Twilight Zone episode, To Serve Man, where the aliens show up, and it's great. They're showing new ways to grow enough food for everyone, and they're introducing all of this science, and, they leave a book that there's this team trying to translate what the book means, and, they translate the title, and it's To Serve Man. And, the classic Twilight Zone twist is all the humans are getting on the spaceships to go visit their planet, and the code breakers have broken the code, and they run up, don't get on the ship to serve man. It's a cookbook. It's a cookbook. That's kind of what funneling all of the dissident energy onto these platforms always reminds me of. It's to serve man. It's a cookbook. Now we're on the ship. It's too late, right? In a lot of ways, you were better off handing out pamphlets because no one could shut you down, right? And anybody who was interested in your radical politics knew where to find it, and they would seek it out. And they would gather together, and nobody could really do anything about that. Now, look at the danger of this. We have put ourselves in a position where the class enemies that these shows are antagonizing are the ones who decide whether or not you have a platform. That is truly a cookbook, right? We have truly been fattened up and led to the slaughter as independent media by being funneled into these platforms. Of course, you can't go back. You can't go back to the Union Square thing. The Nation of Islam guys are still doing it, but that's about it. And maybe they're the smart ones. They never stopped handing out that Muhammad Speaks, I think it's called.
Right.
They're still doing it like that. So maybe they foresaw the dangers of being funneled onto these platforms in a way that others didn't. But yeah, and also, to maybe put a button on the running theme of the show, neoliberalism destroyed this country, destroyed it. They could pretend that they still had the love of the people until Donald Trump got elected. Donald Trump was the wages of Reaganomics and decades of extracting wealth from working and middle class and destroying the opportunity to advance that kept faith in the institutions together, that kept people believing in America, the American dream, right? The basic underlying belief that, well, if you're poor, it's your own fault. It was easier to believe that when you really did have guys like Homer Simpson, who fucking had houses and cars and garages, who really didn't have to work hard for it and didn't really deserve it, right? So it was easy to believe in America and to believe that anybody who was poor had it coming, right? Because you must be lazy, right? If in this country you can't make it. Once all that collapsed, once all that fell apart, I always say with Donald Trump, the only surprising thing about Donald Trump is that it took so long for a guy like that to rise after decades and decades and decades of wealth extraction. But when Donald Trump got elected, they realized they lost the people's love. And at that point, our elite class, rather than do self-reflection and self-examination, went on a war against the narrative. They went on a war to propagandize the population into realizing that if they don't love them, the fault is in them because they're not doing anything wrong. And of course, you're racist, as we saw in the Vox article, and you're just afraid of gay people or some such thing. There couldn't be any underlying problem with the system. And this is why independent platforms are such a danger to them, because they can't have anyone not singing from that hymnal. Everyone has to be singing from that same choir book, right? Because their whole project is so deeply unpopular and so loathsome, and so ultimately there's nothing in their program for most of the population. So all they have is, you're a right winger, you're problematic, you're a Putin puppet. That's all they have. That's all they have. That's when you're dealing with an elite class that has nothing to offer the people. They have to fall back on that kind of "you're guilty of wrong" think.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take a few more super chats. Then we got one more segment on the evening. Dave Delarai, thanks for the $8. Russ, what food have you tried to eat but couldn't? I had chilled pureed crab served in its shell once. Ordered Papa's Fritas instead.
Okay. So as I have said, I'm here to study and learn. Like that whole food thing hasn't been a priority to me. So I've tended to just eat where I am, and that's about it. I might, because there are some restaurants here serving very traditional Greek food. So I might have a rabbit stew tomorrow, because I see that on a lot of menus of the places that are offering a more traditional Greek kind of thing. I'm just afraid it's going to be too gamey and nasty. But
rabbit?
Yeah.
I ate it one time. I didn't want to eat it because, it always kind of feels weird. There was an Italian place in Brooklyn where I used to live in East Williamsburg. They had a great, there's basically Graham Avenue in East Williamsburg is its own, Little Italy. It's like a forgotten strip. It's just like Arthur Avenue, except smaller. But there was this amazing place. It was dirt cheap, too. I mean, for what it was, you get these meals for $12, $13. They had all this creative stuff. They had this one pasta dish with pecari pasta with fig and pine nuts, and then this other one was it was rabbit with a ragu sauce with mint in it, and it was very, very good. But it was in a pasta sauce, so it was very little. It wasn't like a stew where it might be a little gamey. I don't know. But I only ate it once. Yeah, I feel great about eating.
I will say this.
The rabbit, I mean, it's cute. I mean, I know I'm a hypocrite because all animals are worthy of the same sort of respect that we would afford life. But, a rabbit is that's a cartoon character,
Yeah, I mean, that's not my hesitation. I just don't know if I'm going to like it. I'm afraid I'm going to order it and then be like, eh. I will say this, though. You want to talk about locally sourced. I ordered mussels last night. And I've never seen this, because probably the mussels you usually get in a restaurant in America are probably farmed. This had the barnacles on the shell of these mussels. I've never had
a seafood guy. I wouldn't know. I don't like seafood.
Yeah. That's how you see mussels when you see them attached to a rock. They'll have barnacles that are growing on the shell and stuff. I've never been served mussels that had that on the shell. And I asked her, I was like, this is caught out of the ocean, right? She was like, yeah, north of Greece.
Yeah, I imagine. Why wouldn't it be? Courtney says, West hired the woman who doctors accuse of abuse for pushing trans on a non-trans kid and calls me a Nazi fascist for not doing it. as an advisor. They called you a Nazi over there? All right. Well, who was the lady? You should message us to see, because I would like to stay up to date on the goings-on of the Cornell campaign, obviously. But thank you, Courtney. Roy Astorietta. Oy, why are you guys coming on here bad-mouthing our friend Pasta? Why? Pasta's ruining Jimmy Dore's viewership hardcore. Flavio Monterola. JD audience doesn't like Pasta. He's a blowhard. I mean, I don't know what you want me to say about that. I think he's doing fine. I think he's doing well. And the numbers seem good to me. What the hell do I know? Just on the view counts. Although now I think we did interfere with their stream, right? Because Wednesday nights they're on, but they're on early. So I think they probably ended by the time we went on, or were almost ended. All right, let's do one more segment of the night. You guys have been looking forward to this. This got a little more play than I thought it would, actually. But Ralph Nader, of course, made himself very, very famous after the 2000 presidential election. Now, wary of Trump, offers to help Joe Biden win. So this is an article in the Washington Post. The liberal activist Ralph Nader still remembers nearly the exact words Joe Biden used to banish him from the U.S. Senate 23 years ago after Nader's Green Party presidential bid in 2000 won 97,000 votes in the state of Florida, which, as we all know, George W. Bush, quote-unquote, won that state by 537 votes. Ralph Nader is not going to be welcome anywhere near the corridors, then Senator Biden had declared, blaming the consumer advocate for Democrat Al Gore's defeat to Republican George W. Bush. I didn't realize that actually Joe Biden himself had some harsh words for him. So began Nader's long exile from Democratic Capitol Hill hideaways, where Nader had once been feted as a conquering policy genius. Nader, a spry 89-year-old who works remotely because of COVID concerns, still resents the slights. But if you ask him these days about Biden's re-election fight in 2024, he does not respond with his old jibes about Republicans and Democrats being nothing more than Tweedledum and Tweedledee. I remember those lines. We are stuck with Biden now, Nader says in his cantankerous way. In a two-party duopoly, if one should be defeated ferociously, deserving of ferocious defeat in that calculation, and for the moment, Nader wants everyone to know that this has become his overriding political mission. I know the difference between fascism and autocracy, and I'll take autocracy anytime, Nader said in a recent telephone interview. That could be Biden's new campaign motto. I'll take autocracy anytime. That should be on the Biden-Harris bumper sticker. Fascism is what the GOP is the architecture of, and autocracy is what the Democrats are practitioners of. But autocracy leaves an opening. They don't suppress votes. They don't suppress free speech. Really. I mean, that, of all lines, is just the biggest head-scratcher in this entire piece. Okay, first of all,
what the fuck? I mean, all I can say is he's 89. He might not really be up on the Twitter files, but you should be if you're going to hold forth on these kinds of subjects. And they don't suppress votes. Jesus Christ, you fucking ran multiple times a third-party candidate. How do you not know that they suppress votes?
Yeah, it's just absolutely insane. And like I said, I mean, I'm sorry, like you said, it's hard not to chalk this up to old age. Yeah, I mean, 89 years old. Because what kind of a point is that? First of all, you talk about, they talk about Cornell saying Biden is a neoliberal, Trump is a neo-fascist. Talk about trying to parse that, right? It's hard enough to parse that. Try to thread the needle, try to walk that line between, well, when it comes to fascism or autocracy, I'll take autocracy any day over fascism. I mean, what the hell are you even talking about? I mean, it's just such a ridiculous point. No, autocrats don't suppress votes or free speech. Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't even know what point you're attempting to make.
So how is it an autocracy then?
Exactly. Right, exactly. Right, if they don't suppress votes or free speech, then what makes them autocratic? Exactly.
Right. Like by definition, doesn't that mean that they're not running a proper process? And this is, I don't know, man. Does he think for running third party he's going to go to hell when he dies? So he's trying to repent at the final hour. What? It's just really mind boggling. Like from Nader.
Well,
Like,
again, we
they're
go
never-
back to the Nord Stream pipeline. Like, you're so afraid of Donald Trump, who, represents this fascism and this totalitarianism. Oh, we can't have that. Once again, you go back to what Jimmy said at the UN, what a lot of people have been saying for a year. Jose Vega screams about this every chance he gets. I mean, what could
Literally.
be more fascistic than destroying an ally's critical infrastructure to make their economy more dependent on the West than the source of their cheap resources? Like, what are you talking about? And free speech, I mean, that's just from outer space. That just must be, he's 89 years old, doesn't know how to work a computer, doesn't know what social media is, doesn't know what it means to censor the internet. Like, that's just completely ignorant. I mean, that's just absolute ignorance. We'll read on. A couple more slides here. Nader says no formal Biden endorsement will be forthcoming, and he still supports the idea of third parties in principle. Oh, where have we heard that before? Biden is better than he has ever been, but he is still terrible on Empire and Wall Street, is about as close as he will come to complimenting the president. But the cover boy for Newsweek in 1968 and Time in 1969 has devoted himself as he approaches his 10th decade of life to, in his view, making Democrats better at being Democrats. Oh, funny he should end up there. Funny he should end up there. Wow. For months, he has been calling and snail mailing. Oh, see, okay. Well, that actually, I forgot that. He's been snail mailing elected officials. That explains why he doesn't. That explains why he said that the Democrats are actually more pro free speech. Right?
Yeah.
Doesn't use the email. Doesn't use the internet. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That at least you have some excuse there. Still wrong, but you obviously have a little bit of an excuse. Go ahead.
Yeah, as long as they deliver his mail, he thinks they're not suppressing speech.
Right, they're not suppressing free speech. Hey, the mail arrives on time. Yeah, as long as his letters aren't getting lost. Right, he sends everything certified to make sure, and as long as they get delivered, then he figures he's being afforded all of his constitutional rights.
When I write a letter to a Republican, it only arrives maybe half the time.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. For months, he has been calling and snail mailing elected officials and operatives his thoughts about how the party must improve its sales pitches. He produced a 10-point plan for improving the party's messaging and campaign tactics last year, calling for harder punches at the GOP and more liberal policy solutions. Okay, so he gave them a 10-point plan. Let's see what he's heard from them. The response has been mostly nothing. Unreturned calls as he counts in the thousands, a result of resentments over his 2000, 2004, and 2008 third-party presidential campaigns. Even news outlets that used to cover his crusades have moved on. The main press I get these days is the obituary columns, he jokes. I just want to pause there for a second.
Don't quit your day job, Ralph.
I mean, of course you're going to be ignored. Once you cross them, they never let you back in. They are literally like the mafia in that way. When you cross one of these two major parties,
unless you're
like
a Republican,
the mob.
They love the Steve Schmitz. They love the George Bush.
If you are a crossover from one to another, they'll let you into the other. But I'm
They
saying
love
once you're in one of these gangs, this is why Jesse Ventura calls them gangs, because they function that way. Gangs demand loyalty, right? The mob demands loyalty because these are a bunch of fucking crooks running around, trading money, buying and selling influence. They need you attached to them because they need you to need them. Once you extricate yourself from their group, they do not let you back in. This is why I say, whatever you want to say about people, like an Andrew Yang type, you can't say they're doing it for the money. You don't leave you don't leave one of the five families for the money to go work on the streets of Hoboken. Like, you don't do that. The money is worse. The money is always worse outside the two-party system than it is inside. And so once you burned them in the early and mid-2000s, that's it. You're done. They're never taking your calls again. It doesn't matter what advice you have, how good it is. You could give them a magic, screed that would win them every election from now to the end of time. They don't care. Once you cross them, it is like crossing the Gambino crime family. You are not allowed back in. All right? They want nothing to do with you ever again, and that's if you're lucky. And he's, oh, well, yeah, they don't take my calls. Hey, I have all this advice for them. Of course they're not going to take it. First of all, winning is not their number one priority. Protecting the gang is the number one priority.
Fuck that
Cornel
fucking
West.
parakeet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cornel West has the most complete progressive agenda. It almost doesn't have any progressive aberrations, Nader said. The problem is that the Greens are not that organized. It is hardly a secret. And you can't run a presidential campaign if you don't have local candidates and some kind of organization around the country. That's a striking thing to hear from the man who used to respond in 2000 to Democratic concerns that he was a spoiler, saying both parties must feel the heat. Did I learn the lesson that this was an ironclad two-party duopoly absent a farmers-level progressive 1887 movement? Yeah, I learned it. So there you go. Officially admitting defeat, Ralph Nader waving the white flag of surrender.
You're going to get your mind right, and I mean right.
Exactly. Just admitting, basically in as many words, that yes, they broke me. And
Ralph
now
got
he
his
is
mind
confined to
right.
what he views as lesser evilism, although he really couldn't understand who the lesser evil is because he's apparently still snail mailing letters, which means he doesn't understand the threat of censorship. And, I don't know to what extent he was ever really locked into foreign policy. I don't think ever that much. But obviously, those concerns are not weighing heavily on him either. Just a pretty stunning piece. And it's actually a very interesting article. I recommend you guys read the whole thing. But yeah, that is a guy who's obviously just been brought to heel. And in a sense, it's a sad thing to see. I was never a huge admirer of Nader's, but he was always an interesting character. But yeah, now at 89, he's gone basically the way of Noam Chomsky, which is, yeah, come election day, you have to vote for Joe Biden.
I just don't really understand it. You're 89. Any nap could be your last. Go out spitting in their fucking eye, man. Like, come on. If there's ever a time to be like, go fuck yourself, you sons of bitches, it's at the end, man. How much more time what can they do to you now?
Right.
Like, you don't have a future to think about. You don't have a career to think about, right? Like, you've done what you're going to do, right? Go out defiant. Go out like a fucking man, goddammit. Well, fucking bitch like that.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. Saying they don't call me back. I've called them thousands of times. I mail them letters. They ignore me. Of course. I mean, come on.
Yeah, like what did you think? What do you think? You're like public enemy number one for them, right? Their whole mythology is that you cost Al Gore the election.
Right.
They're never gonna allow you to be brought on as some kind of advisor, emeritus character. Like, what did you think was going to happen? I mean, I guess he thought that they felt there would be value in touting Nader's conversion to, Green Party wrong-minded people, and they'd bring him back in for that reason. But Ralph, if anyone should know that for these motherfuckers, they make money coming and going. They make money either way. They make money if they're out of power. They make money on the we have to get back in power grift. And if they're in power, they make money off their insider trading. And, I mean, it doesn't matter for them.
Yeah, exactly. And to see him just cucked like that at 89, yeah, you figure if you only got a few years left, why not go down with some fight in you? But The other thing that's notable there is, and look, like Nader was never a guy who, to my knowledge, stayed particularly involved with the Greens after his runs, but you see him saying what everybody who's worked with the Greens eventually says about the Greens, which is it's a joke of an organization. So that wasn't the most surprising thing. But, you don't have to shill for the Greens if you don't want to, but you should at least go down with a little more fight than that, I mean, Ventura's at the point now where he says he doesn't believe in the third-party movement anymore. He believes we should just ban parties altogether, right? George Washington's vision. No parties. Something, but no. Instead, at the very end, just, throwing in the towel. Sad thing to see. All right, let's take, we have some super chats here. We have a couple of callers. All right, I'm going to try this. So for those of you who don't know, my dad is on the line because his thing is the Nord Stream pipeline. Hey, are you there? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Very good.
Can you hear
got
me?
It working? Yes, I
can.
can.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I don't know how the hell I did it. It was it was a major pain in the ass, but I don't want to waste time with that, except to say this. I got this notice saying that I looked at my spam and it said in order to get access to this, you have to declare this email not spam, but it didn't tell you how to declare it not spam. I finally found a little 2 words not spam hidden somewhere in the corner.
All right, good.
It was a pain in the ass. But let me not. Okay, but let me not. Well, because most of your audience is far more savvy about this stuff than I am, so you could all make fun of me and Nader for being, dawdling old men who don't know how to work this crap. But I just want to talk, and I will be brief, about the Greenwald piece that you covered partially. I think it's very important that people listen to that. The original piece, it was about a little over an hour, and it was a
long one. Yeah.
He went into great detail about that one particular subject, and I found it mortifying that YouTube and these other platforms seem to be way beyond the wettest dream that Big Brother ever could have had in terms of mass surveillance. I kind of always knew
because they have more
it.
power. Well, yeah, there's more power. There's more reach. There's more reach than any government could have.
Well, the thing is that, free speech has been a huge issue with me for many, many years, Keith. As you know, I've been arrested several times for holding up signs that in quote unquote inappropriate places. The judges always threw the case out. And finally, at least up in the Hudson Valley where I do most of my sedition, the cops have been quite tolerant of me, and I haven't had any problems. In fact, I've had help from the police when I very frequently, 3 or 4 times a week, go out with some kind of protest sign. As you know, I always keep a blank placard in my trunk and a magic marker handy, so if anything pisses me off, I can stop my car, write about it, and hold up the sign right away. It's the only catharsis I have. But at any rate, I'm terrified that people are totally disinterested in that issue of free speech, not over the internet. I'm glad Glenn Greenwald is giving that appropriate analysis and explanation, and I understand it better than I did before listening to him. But they don't understand what's happening on the streets, and that's what terrifies me. And I won't be too much longer. I am stunned every day when I look at the various peace organizations, UNAC, Cold Pink, and try to find events to attend, protesting what's going on, or at least a ban the bomb event. In 1982 in Central Park, because Reagan was elected and he made some noises that seemed a little bit more bellicose than Carter had been. So there, over 1 million people showed up in Central Park with ban the bomb signs, right? Okay. We are far closer to a nuclear catastrophe now than we were in 1982. Probably even closer than we were in 1960, whatever the hell the Bay of Pigs was, whenever that happened. And no one's doing anything, and it shocks me. So I just want to, leave your audience with this. I know a large number of them are from New York, but regardless of where you're from, please get your asses out there. I'm going to ask this as with all due respect, and in fact, with probably a lot more respect than is due you assholes. You get the fuck out on the street. No, listen to me.
This is the most depraved audience on YouTube.
Well, no, but they come on, man. I mean, just
No, I think that was probably directed
more
more at us because I understand what you're saying because it's an interesting thing where like now when there's an event somewhere we all live stream it, which in a sense is good, right? Because it gets the word out, but in a sense it can deter people from actually going, right? If they figure, well, I can stay home and I can watch it on a screen, right?
Exactly. And, this Sunday, rather, at 2 p.m., this is in New York City. I'm sure there are similar events in other places. There's going to be a group meeting at Columbus Circle, 58th and 8th, I think, at 2 o'clock on Sunday. And they're going to be marching down to 42nd Street, a short march, about 3/4 of a mile
Broadway.
at most. Yeah, bro. And if you're from New York, please try your best to show up, for crying out loud. But if you're not from New York, do it yourself. Go to the 99-cent store, which is now the $1.25 store. Buy yourself a placard, buy yourself a magic marker, write down what's bothering you, stand on a fucking corner. I guarantee you, Pornhub will still be waiting for you when you get home. You could get back to your normal life, but put in a little bit of time out there in what we used to call the real world. And I'll leave you with that. And thank you. And you guys are doing a great job. Great job.
All right. Thank you very much.
But please try to publicize these events more. Try to get these pricks out there.
I didn't know about this until you just you just told me about it now. All right. Thanks for the call. All right, we got a lot of callers here tonight. I'm gonna go to Red Rebel Dragon and then I'll go to you, Tusker, at the end. So Red Rebel Dragon, do you want to talk? If yes, turn your mic on because you're muted. Going once, going. It looks like you're trying to figure it out. There you are. Hey, what's going on?
It's all good. Finally figured this out.
Yes, you've been a long-time supporter of ours. Thank you. It's good to finally meet you. Where are you calling from?
Tasmania.
All right, beautiful.
It is beautiful, and summer's coming, but boy, watching all of this from here every day, I just think, thank God I'm in Tasmania.
Yeah.
But no, it's unbelievable. But I did go over. I don't know. I think I'm back stream here because I'm linked in through the Patreon, which has me watching through YouTube.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'm on Rumble on my phone, which means you get.
Well, that's good. That means you're supporting us in a few different places at once.
That's right. And
we probably made about 21 cents in ad revenue off you alone this broadcast. So thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, Rumble's interesting, but it's on my phone, so chat is hard. Chat is better, I think, on YouTube. Rumble throws you out if you try, and it stops it if you try and do anything else. Like
right. Yeah, I know. The functionality is no good.
There's a lot of problems with that, but I've been looking up all the FAM, Revolutionary Blackout, the Midwest Marxists.
So you've been getting around the Rumble app then?
And following them. You got to go into the search bar. You got to look them up, then click on the link, and then click follow, because the follower numbers on Rumble are low, and it really is right wing on the browser. The reason it's right wing on the browser is because the right wingers were the first to flock there because they were the first to get censored. Just as everybody could have told you, as soon as this whole thing started, back when they did it to Alex Jones, as soon as what everybody could have told you then is what's happening now, which is eventually that will happen to everybody. And it's a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. And so, this has been a major moment, a major couple of weeks now for these alternative platforms, because it takes a big story to get people to actually take you seriously. We've been saying over and over again,
You got to follow us on more than one platform. You cannot just follow us on YouTube. You have to follow us more than one place. Join the Substack. It's free. If you can support the show, as you obviously do, we thank you very much for that. That is what censor-proofs the operation fully. But yeah, no, this is a huge moment where people are finally getting a sense.
Yeah, I just think that everybody should go over to Rumble and just start getting the followings up for
what
the
everybody's saying now.
radical left wing.
This is what everybody's saying now. This is what we said a while ago, and it creates a precarious situation because, in a sense, you are forced to compete with yourself. I mean, unless people do what you do, which is watch us on 3 platforms at once. That's great. That's a win-win. but yeah, they force you to compete with yourself, and they force you to sabotage yourself in the short term because there's no question that earnings are going to be lower in the short term if we tell people don't watch YouTube at all, right? Like we can't do that because then we cut off all of all of our flow, and now we can't afford to do the show 3 times a week. So it's a very, very precarious situation that they force us into. But thank you very much for the call, and thank you for your support. I'm going to put you in the back now because we got another caller, but it was great to meet you.
No
thank
worries.
you so much.
Nice
Thank
to see
you.
you.
Of course.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. All right. One more long line tonight. Oh, you all know this one. Hey, Tusker, what's going on?
Hey, everyone. What's up?
What's up? What's up? You said you were calling to talk about Ralph Nader.
That fucking motherfucker. Like, what? Oh, God. What was the exact line? It was, I know what fascism is, and I prefer autocracy.
Yeah, here, I have it. I haven't gotten rid of this exhibit yet.
Yeah, please, don't get rid of that.
It's like an
amazing quote.
statement.
Yeah,
Like,
amazing statement.
what
Yeah,
does
I know the
that even
difference
mean?
between, that's going to be on his headstone. I know the difference between fascism and autocracy, and I'll take autocracy anytime.
Well, okay.
I know the difference between hell and purgatory, and I'll take purgatory.
Well, but
I prefer monarchy to oligarchy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but I think my issue with it is it's just that like there are so many of these people like on the left that generally will sit there and say, "Oh, I know fascism. I can recognize fascism. I've heard what fascism is. Fascism is just generalized oppression. That's what fascism is. It's just generalized oppression, or it's racism, or like anything like that." Ralph Nader has been in a the left wing of the establishment for how many years now? And he has never once deigned to dirty his fingers with maybe like the commie definition of it. Like maybe from one of the other sides of the left that has fought wars against it, that had books written about it. Like the entire like Nazi state in Germany was, let's go get those Jew Bolsheviks, Judeo-Bolshevik, Jew commies. They haven't ever once considered maybe taking
That's going to be the name of our boy band. Actually, we're working on that.
Yeah.
Jew commies.
Jew commies.
I mean, literally, I mean, that is what he's saying. And if you read Mein Kampf, it's like every other word is Jew commies. It's insane, but they never look at it. He just goes, fascism is generalized oppression. So I just kind of, you know what I like to do. I have a couple of things here. This, and once again, another book from 1935, before the war had even started. And let's see, we say fascism is the power of finance capital itself. It is the organization of terrorist vengeance against the working class and the revolutionary section of the peasantry and intelligentsia. In foreign policy, fascism is chauvinism in its crudest form, fomenting the bestial hatred of other nations. Then I have, let's see, fascism aims at the most unbridled exploitation of the masses, but it appeals to them with the most artful anti-capitalist demagogy, taking advantage of the profound hatred entertained by the toilers for the piratical bourgeoisie, the banks, trusts, and the financial magnates, and advancing slogans which at the moment are the most alluring to the politically immature masses. In Germany, the slogan, "The general welfare is higher than the welfare of the individual." In Italy, our state is not a capitalist, but a corporate state. In Japan, for Japan, without exploitation. In the United States, share the wealth, and so forth. Those are the slogans. Now, what side? Who do you hear a lot of that demagogic rhetoric coming from these days? Is it from the Republican Party? Because I certainly don't hear share the wealth.
Mostly Joy Behar, actually.
But I mean, and then it says fascism delivers up the people to be devoured by the most corrupt, most venal element, but comes before them with the demand for an honest and incorruptible government.
Right. Well, I mean, look, the parsing of autocracy and fascism is just ludicrous. And, you know, fascism as a word has just been watered down. I mean, it doesn't mean anything anymore.
It doesn't.
You know, and you know, this is what, not to open this can of worms, but this is what Jimmy was, I think, trying to communicate to Cornell in the interview, is that you're using all these terms. The meaning has been stripped from a lot of these terms, whether you like it or not. Like, it's unfortunate that a term like white supremacy has lost a lot of its teeth. It shouldn't. But, you know, they call anything they don't like, they call that white supremacy. They called physical fitness white supremacy. Why is the far right obsessed with physical fitness? Like, once the culture goes that far, you have to sort of adjust how you frame these issues and how you think about these issues. At this point, to be fear-mongering about fascism is to do nothing else but carry water for the Democratic Party, because fascism is just another buzzword that they use, just like, you know, they use sexism in 2016, or, you know, racism during the Trump, or xenophobia during the Trump years with regard to all of the stuff going on at the southern border, even though the border situation on a humanitarian level is far worse now than it was under Trump. You know, they will just employ these words as signals to their kind and to their media, you know, and to their voter base. And at a certain point, it loses meaning. And so, you know, whether you're Nader or Cornell, you start fear-mongering about the rise of fascism, all you're doing is rehashing an MSNBC talking point of that, you know, right now.
I mean,
and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that, like, we can't have adult conversations using words as they were meant, and, you know, using, you know, actually honoring the language, right? You know, like, respecting each other enough to have these conversations. But at this point, you know, that word fascism is just a stand-in for everything liberals don't like about people who aren't liberals. That's all it is.
Yeah. And Russell, go ahead, and then you were trying to say something.
Well, yeah. I mean, these words don't have any underlying purpose or even meaning other than to identify who is in the out group.
Right,
who
exactly.
is not
That was a simpler way of saying it, but yes.
There's no, if you ask most of these libs what is fascism, they couldn't tell you. They're going to say something about MAGA people and red
anti-Semitism,
right? Nazism, right? It's all right.
You know, they'll say it's the, like, whatever, the 3% sign. They'll say, like, it seems like a lot of it revolves around aesthetics or kind of mean things that people say.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, if you use the 14 points definition, which I think is the best, because, well, I mean, I think that's useful because it really paints it as full a picture as I think you can. I think it's useful for people to, you know, examine fascism as a system, right? As a sort of unofficial sort of system, right? As something loose, something amorphous, yet something you could still kind of define. If you use the 14 points, you know, Donald Trump satisfies probably 9 or 10 of them. Joe Biden satisfies, you know, 8 or 9 of them. You know what I mean? Like, it's very close. Well, it's very close. Like, there is no clear answer as to who the bigger fascist is.
Well, right, but
yeah, I mean, not fascism is not on the menu when those are the choices you're talking about. It's a question of what kind of fascism aesthetically you want. The difference is more in aesthetics and emphasis than essence.
I think it all ends up in the same way. But what I will say about the difference between that 14 points of fascism or between the more liberal descriptions of fascism is that it leaves out the relationship specifically of finance capital. Finance capital. If you read any like theory from my side that no one ever wants to touch because we're all brutes and gulags and all that other type of stuff, every single one of them goes over and over and over again and talked about how finance capital specifically are the people that are behind the movements. They fund the movements, they do all that other type of stuff. So it doesn't show the class nature of fascism, which is finance capital, which is Wall Street. And I understand there are a lot of what I would call industrial capitalists that are firmly behind Trump because they see his tax cuts and all that other type of stuff as a way to sort of invest in their properties, you know, that type of stuff, not for like wages or anything like that, but to grow their business. Hopefully one day they'll be able to put it on Wall Street. Hopefully one day they'll be one of those magnates, but they haven't reached the top of the echelon. And it's finance capital that controls fascism because they're the ones that speculate. They're the ones that actually loan the money for industrialists to use big capital.
Sure, and that's a good point, and you know that actually is a very good point. And I didn't think of it that way because when you think of it that way, which is totally valid, at that point there's no point in really parsing any of this, right? Because at this point they're all fascists, right? Like under that definition, every politician is a fascist, right? The 14 points is more useful for parsing it at the next level down, if that makes sense, right? Because if you look at it from your perspective, it's a no-brainer. Every single one of them is a fascist by that definition.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, not. I wouldn't necessarily say. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say, where has Wall Street been funding the politicians for the past couple years?
Well, yeah, but past couple years. I mean, first of all, they fund a lot of Republicans too. The
do.
difference is they now fund a lot more Democrats than they used to because the Democrats have been co-opted. But
and
no,
they are the
fund a lot of Republicans too.
Somebody in the chat said the current CEO, so the vampire squid is gone, I think. He said the current CEO of Goldman backs Trump. I would be surprised.
The current CEO what?
I would be surprised that the current CEO of Goldman Sachs backs Trump. I would be surprised. I would be surprised. All those Goldman people now are Democrats. They're all, I mean, they would be Republican if the Republican person were the more establishment figure. I mean, they're for whoever is the most aligned with their interests. And as of now, that's the Democrats.
Yeah, but also just in that handful of slogans that I kind of read from that it sounds a lot like what comes out of sort of the left wing of capitalism, which is the Democratic Party. Like it does kind of sound like some of their slogans, where they pretend to be kind of for the little guy, but in reality, they do everything against the working class. And so they're trying to hide the true face of it. And yeah, as far as the way that I see like industrial capital, I see them more as like new money, more entrepreneurs. They haven't yet reached that trust level of like money, so much money, more money than you could ever think of. It's just hidden offshore. You know, that's all finance capital. And we don't talk and I mean, people talk about this all the time. They go, Bezos, the richest man, Elon Musk, the richest man. They're not the richest men in the world. The richest men in the world are still the same group of families that were the richest men in the world back before the Great Depression. Those are still the richest families hidden it from.
Yeah, I was. I sent you that link. There's that channel. What is it called? Old Money.
Yeah.
That gets into that, and there was a whole video they got into where they were like, "Yeah, these people like Mark Zuckerberg, these are not the real."
No, I mean,
upper
that's new
echelon.
money. That's Upper West Side money, right? It's not Upper East Side
Right.
money, right? You know,
Right.
It's Soho,
Right. It was
my
making the
meatpacking
point that
district,
you have
right?
these families that control an amount of money that is inconceivable. That people can't even imagine how much money they control.
Let's take some super chats here.
Yeah.
Before we wrap. JVB from Rock Fan, critique of neoliberalism. This is profound, Russell. So important. Thank you, too. Well, thank you, JVB. I think you're talking about Russell's article that he found, the book review. Thank you very much. Elizabeth Marshall, thanks for the $5. Excellent convo tonight. Just signed up on Patreon. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. We appreciate that.
Thank
Here's
you.
a little extra towards coffee and the proper size trash bags. Yes. If somebody commented on our last video that they thought the defining merch for New Dissidents would be like the shirt or something or the cowbell, but it's actually the 18-gallon trash bag will be the defining merch of this show. Yes, we'll create an 18-gallon trash bag.
Yeah.
Thank you, George.
Like the logo.
Yeah, right, exactly. We could put it against the black trash bag. It would actually look good, like that gold logo on a black garbage bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you also need to put the logo on all, like you need to make trash cans that are the sizes that are currently being sold, and then plus then you have your official DD trash bag that goes in the official DD trash can, but still sell the other.
Exactly.
You gotta capitalize on this market, y'all.
Exactly. Well, George Gunnell, speaking of merch, says, folks, send back merch. Demand refund until it comes with union-made labels, then double your order. Yo, my kids are making our merch. I got my twins making our merch. They're making the shirts. Yeah,
That's why we were really worried when they got sick. We lost our labor pool.
I know, yeah. But maybe, I mean, if they want to unionize, I won't stop them. So maybe we can have that happen.
Gonna have to buy a little popsicle.
I'm the bad cop. You can have me break the strike.
Oh, by the way, I should give you guys an update on my little ones. I messaged Tusker and Russell about this both, but they went for their follow up with the pediatric cardiologist, and so far they got the all good. My one guy got discharged entirely. He was the guy who we suspected had Kawasaki disease, but wasn't formally diagnosed, and there could be complications if you miss the diagnosis and don't treat it. But his heart exam was good, and since he had it earlier on, they discharged him and said there's almost no chance of any long-term effects, so that's good. Sawyer got a very good first exam. We have to go back in 4 weeks as a formality because they have to do 2 follow-ups if you're not as far along in the sort of Kawasaki timeline. But they said he's almost certainly good too, because they said it's very rare that anything develops after the 2-week part. So good news on the kiddo front. So thank you guys all for your support through all of that. That was quite the thing to go through. Bulla, thanks for the $2. Looking pretty good, giving us the Larry David thing. Bulla 24 looking good. Yes, Bulla 24 is looking good. You might have to re-enter the race, actually. We'll see if we can get a fundraiser. Yeah.
We might have to challenge West for the Green Party nomination.
He's gonna have to do a Ross Perot.
He should actually challenge Cornell for the Green Party nomination. That would actually be amazing.
That would be the funniest thing we've ever seen.
That would be the funniest thing ever.
I mean, honest. He couldn't run the campaign any worse.
Yeah, he could go challenge Cornell for the Greens. Put it in the microwave. Put what in the microwave? Is that a Ralph Nader reference? Because I see this one. Fuck seatbelts anyways. I like that. Oh, boy. All righty, folks. Well, that wraps us for the evening. Does it not, Jake? Do we have anything else? No, we do not. All right. Well, great crowd in here tonight. Thank you all for skipping the debate with us. Fuck the debate. Who cares about the debate? What kind of loser would watch that debate?
Fuck them.
Fuck them. It is, what is it, 6 o'clock in the morning? Sunrise almost over there in Greece, right?
It is 6 a.m. I'm gonna catch some Z's.
All righty.
I leave for Athens tomorrow.
All right, beautiful. So you will be on mainland Greece on Sunday. I got Nick Cruz joining us this Friday morning, so that's when we will see you all again. But Patreon members and paid Substack subscribers, we will be on again 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. We're doing matinees this month for the patron show since Russell is 7 hours in front of us. But we thank you guys. We had a great time on the last one, and we hope to have a great time again tomorrow. So patreon.com/Due Dissidents if you want to sign up and support the show. We had a couple of you guys sign up over the course of this broadcast, so thank you guys very much for that. Thank you to everybody watching on YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin. Thank you, Tusker, for calling in. Thank you for Red Rebel Dragon. Thanks to my dad for calling in. Thanks to our friend and producer, Jake, in the booth. Round of applause for Jake on the way out. We will see you all again Friday morning here on the main show, bright and early, 9 a.m., 3 p.m., patrons and paid Substack subscribers, special supporter stream tomorrow. Don't miss it. We'll see you all next time. Until we meet again, be safe and be well, and thank you very much.
Opa!
Please clap.